Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Last Cast, HBO's unofficial Last of Us recap podcast. This show hosted each week by me, Jack, and Andrew.
Hello.
We'll take a deeper look into the mega TV series event, The Last of Us. We'll break down, assess, compare, contrast, and have just a little bit of fun as we go. So grab yourself a cup of Joel's favorite blend and let's get on with it.
That's right.
We really have to decide what his favorite blend is at this point.
We should let the audience decide, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Let us know. What do you think Joel's go-to coffee was?
We've known Joel for 5 episodes now.
We've known Joel for 10 years.
Right. Oh, again, let's just divorce them for a moment because we're not a video game podcast here. We're a video game podcast there. Yeah. This Joel, who drinks out of a pristine thermos, or did, rest in peace thermos, what is he drinking? You know? What's actually even available in the post-apocalypse?
Probably just instant, like Folgers instant.
Yeah, it's probably going to be like a medium roast, you know?
Yeah.
It's probably just the most mildest, maybe dark, potentially, because again, a lot of flavor, but not too much pep for that. So let us know.
I'd imagine people would want a lot of pep in the post-apocalypse.
Right, as much as you can get, especially if if you're standing watch all night as a friggin' sentinel. So there you go.
Yeah. So we're a little bit delayed this week. It was just kind of a week. We had some family things going on. I have some health issues, but the Eagles lost the Super Bowl, which was just so sad and tragic. And we're from Philly, so it affects me, not so much Andrew because he's not a sports ball person, but I'm happily still. I wanted to wear the jersey. I'm wearing the jersey regardless if they won or lost. So
still quite an accomplishment to get to the end, right? So
sure.
You know,
second best in the entire NFL. Not bad.
Yeah, and Rihanna. Oh my gosh, you know.
Do you know? So 118 million viewers tuned in for Rihanna's show, whereas the Super Bowl only drew 113. So
I could see it. Yeah, I could see it. Yeah.
But that those numbers right there are just so enormous, which is why The Last of Us episode 5 Endure and Survive aired on Friday and not Sunday.
Right.
Because even though the viewership for The Last of Us show is going up every single week, which is incredible.
Yeah. It's
still not drawing almost 120 million people. So
yet, you know.
Maybe.
I don't know if it ever. I think the highest, the Game of Thrones, maybe the number that they boast about often, and I can't remember. Maybe it was 30 million. It's still just a fraction of what the Super Bowl draws in terms of viewership, and so, you know, any show that was, you know. I don't know if any show will get over 100 million viewers. We just don't live in that kind of world anymore.
Which is weird because didn't the MASH series finale draw like almost 100 million viewers?
Yeah, but there were only like 3 channels back then, you know?
That's true. Yeah, that is true.
I got to look this up. Here we go.
Please, because I'm curious.
Oh, you are right. It was 106 million viewers for MASH.
That's crazy. For MASH.
They don't have shows like that anymore, though. From a, you know, take the most critically acclaimed show that is widely available for free, on broadcast, I should say. And it still pales in comparison. Shows are like, we got 1 million viewers. We're getting a season 2. You know, like that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah. But anyway, we just, thank you. All that to say, thank you for giving us some extra room. Our episodes were, you know, we had extra room because of the episode coming out on Friday. But it was just kind of a disaster week. And we're real people living real lives. So I needed a few extra days, and here we are. The episode will drop on Saturday evening-ish. So
there we go.
It's still there. But
it's still there.
But to get into it, we have just a couple. We actually have 2 new reviews. So I'm gonna talk about the first one because this is an iTunes review from a listener in Australia, and I'm
don't
sorry.
do that again.
Please stop. Please don't. Stop listening.
I'm sorry, James. Deepest condolences. I cannot believe.
Hey.
I almost did it though too. I wanted to talk about shrimps and Barbies and stuff, but I won't. But I've restrained myself.
He might still. Don't ever, just because he says he won't and he makes fun of me doesn't mean he won't.
I forget most of the
I have
things.
3 people that I love very much who live in Australia. So I don't even want to, it's not like I'm completely... Anyway.
How many of them are actually Australian though?
1.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Yeah.
One.
People of expats, as it were, from their respective countries have gone to Australia, which is interesting.
Well, and I don't know if she listens to this show, but if she does, hey, Steph, miss you, girl. But she lived all over in different parts of the world. So Scotland, and then she was in New York for a while, which is why, or how her and I got close and things like that. But she has since moved back to Oz. So, yes, I know Aussies and they're wonderful. So... But all that to say, iTunes does this thing where they don't show you international reviews.
That's right.
I don't know why. It really is dumb. And I know that there's some sort of service that allows us to look at that, but I haven't figured that out. So James took it upon himself to write us an amazing email. I will save that email for a bonus show because now we are starting to get enough messages to where we will do that shortly.
Okay.
But he copy pasted his review and sent it to us. So I'm going to read this one. You can read the next one.
Fair enough.
But James G says, massive fan of Wayfaring Strangers and so joyful to be able to supplement my deep love of the game and now the show with 2 awesome people that seem so genuine, wholesome, and funny. Couldn't be a better duo. Thank you. Now I wait with much anticipation to get the notification that a new podcast has dropped. If you're a fan in any capacity, this podcast is tailor-made for you. Now there we go. And P.S. More Wayfaring West soon, please and thanks.
James.
We appreciate that really much.
I have to get over to my soundboard now. God.
Please make sure you're recording that.
I'm not, but it'll be on this version.
Oh, there we go.
That's Joel from the video game. That is what he's referencing.
Yeah. Again, on our Wayfaring Strangers podcast where we cover the games, subsection of a chapter at a time, we use a lot of sound bites and clips from the game. So James brought that into his review, and that's that. And my parody version of it.
Now there we go.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But James, thank you so much for being a listener of both of our shows and for taking the time to leave us some feedback and then make us aware of it because iTunes is silly.
They're too siloed. James, can I call you Jimmy? Thanks. Or I'll just call you James, actually. You didn't say Jimmy. But, maybe it's a situation where friends call you Jimmy, and I'd love to be friends. So.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, take the second.
Fair enough.
Take the second review, please.
All right. This is from a familiar name, I see, but we'll get to that in a moment. Great pod for those new to TLU or people like me that play the game every couple of months for fun. The in-depth breakdowns of the episodes are insightful and entertaining. And this is from user. Can't believe this got through the iTunes filter. Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars. How's it going?
Yes.
Mars. I was like, what's the nickname here? I'm just gonna go with Mars.
Mars. Yeah.
I was gonna say ass to Mars. What's up, ass to Mars? And I just did, but I don't want to do that. So Mars it is.
Yes, Mars. Also, we recognized your name from a review you left us over on Wayfair, and so very delighted to see you have joined us over here as well. So, and thank you again, James G, for leaving us a review and some love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for all those who are from Wayfaring Strangers, just a tiny little update. There will be a show later in the week coming up. We've said it's just been tough managing everything as one might expect with the kind of fast turnaround of the last cast. And, some things fall out of whack schedule wise.
Yes,
So
a lot to manage.
Yeah. But we are coming back. So, as always with our episodes here, there will be no spoilers for things that we believe may happen in future episodes or anything that does happen in the game that we feel like could happen imminently or in season 2. None of that stuff we will ever talk about on this show. Our draft schedule will be Wednesdays. We missed the mark a couple times, but yes, it'll be next Wednesday for episode 6. If you would like to reach out and contact us and be a part of an upcoming bonus show where we read some emails or direct messages or whatever, you can email us at tloupodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us over on Twitter at tloupodcast and send us a direct message, or Instagram at tloupodcasts, plural, and message us there too. All of that will be compiled and then talked about with the masses. So, yes.
As one does.
Yes. And, pardon. But there will, like I've mentioned a couple times, there will be a bonus show coming soon because we have received enough messages now to, validate one. So look forward to doing that with you, Andrew. So this giveaway announcement, I talked a little bit about this on Twitter. You and I talked about this privately, but Andrew, you know what I do. I take a tiny little idea and then I go poof,
blow it up.
But make it better and bigger, like bigger and better. So
there's still an explosion. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, it's my personality, explosive. It's not great. But all that to say, on episode 6, this is an announcement saying that we're going to do a giveaway.
Oh, it's an announcement of an announcement.
It's an announcement of an announcement. Only because I feel that 4 weeks is too long for people to enter because eventually they'll start to forget about it. I think 3 weeks is a good amount of time. So basically, episode 6, you'll get the details of the announcement and the winner will be chosen live. We will do a live show, a live broadcast on YouTube.
What?
Or Twitch, and
or
then stream to all of the friggin' things. And wherever you would like to join us, please do that. We will announce the winner live after episode 9, the season finale of The Last of Us. So more details about our first and only giveaway for season 1 of The Last Cast coming next week. So literally in like 4 days, you'll find out about it.
Okay.
But very excited. Very excited. Andrew, tell us about the episode summary, both HBO's and your own, please.
Okay. All right. HBO summary goes like this. While attempting to evade the rebels, Joel and Ellie cross paths with the most wanted man in Kansas City. Kathleen continues her hunt. As for my summary, I forgot, and I didn't do one because the schedule is crazy. And I didn't want to, I realized it right as we started recording. And so we're just going to do what we normally do and get right into it. A full breakdown. Yes. And who knows, if you don't want my high level summary, this would be the episode to let me know. No harm, no foul. So
yeah,
let me know.
Yeah. Let us know. I like them. I think, I don't know. I don't know, because I go back and forth. I'm like, no, I love that. And then sometimes I'm like, is that redundant? But I love that. But is it redundant? So let us know what y'all think.
Right.
But the episode 5 breakdown begins now. And this is, for those counting at home, the 3rd episode without a cold open.
Get right into it.
So we're following a bit of a pattern. So I'm going to take this first section. We are still in the Kansas City quarantine zone. The rebels are celebrating the liberation of themselves from Fedra. We see flares being shot into the sky, beatings and killings in the street as it's pretty brutal, honestly. And then a military vehicle drives down said street, or main street, or one of the main streets, with a body dragging behind it full of knives and stabby weapons. It's a pretty gruesome sight, and it just shows you the level of oppression that Fedra must have placed on these people to have taken things to that length. Sam and Henry, I'm going to name them now, even though we do not know yet, but are crouching behind a dumpster. Henry, who is clearly the older brother, shields Sam from the horrors by telling him via American Sign Language to only look at him. They don't have far to go here, and Sam must stay with him no matter what. And we don't know this right away between which brother is deaf, but we, of course, find out shortly that it is Sam. Mm-hmm. And this is something we're going to talk about shortly, and how it affected the overall show, which I think it was a brilliant decision. But from here, the truck passes them and they flee into the direction from whence that vehicle had come. But before we move on, so these sections are a little short before, normally they're a little bit longer, but this episode, they just weren't as long. So if you feel like we're just like stopping quickly, it's not because we want to, it's because just the scene changed. So the choice to make Sam deaf. So we won't go super deep into this just yet, but I don't want to gloss over this fact because I think it's very important to the overall narrative of this episode. And I didn't want people to think that we weren't going to talk about it at all.
Yeah.
So this is something that is different to the games. Sam was not deaf in The Last of Us Part 1. But the choice to give that to the character and give that to the story and bring something new was fantastic.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I really can't wait to continue the dialogue about that. So the violence of this rebel group overthrowing Fedra is another show of how violence begets violence, begets violence, and so on and so forth. We can assume Fedra, of course, has terrorized and abused the quarantine zone and its occupants for years, but and this could be a little bit of a kind of a contentious discussion based on how you feel or how our listeners feel, but when doing the right thing, these rebels, when doing the right thing leads to more violence and blood in the street, is it the right thing?
History has shown this happen many, many times already.
Sure.
It might have been a thing that they actually discussed after the episode, but I can't rightly recall, where you have an oppressive regime in power that then gets overthrown, and the people that overthrew them are just as bad, if not worse, than the regime that was in power. And so, you know, it's not having lived through that personally, right? We probably have listeners who may have actually experienced something like that, right? Like living in a situation like that. Mm-hmm. It's a tricky one because there's no talking to these people, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's no making things fair and just with Fedra, or at least that's how it is positioned in the show here. It just seems like they were being complete assholes the entire time. And you push people so far and the people will push back, right?
Yeah.
That's the story of America. And so there, you know, you could justify it either way, right? You'd be like, well, that's not right because so many people died. It's like, but then in the old way, people were dying anyway, right? Just every day people would probably die in that world. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's a very tricky thing. History shows us though, that it is often the revolution often just continues to perpetuate acts of violence. And not necessarily meaningful change, at least at first.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a lot about themes in this particular episode, specifically themes found in The Last of Us, both the show and the games. Mm-hmm. And this is certainly a pretty abrasive kickoff to the themes that are really heavy in this particular episode. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think, you know, there is no good or bad people. There are just people left at this point. But they do some repetitive things that I think were a little overcooked in this episode, but that will, you know, become apparent as we continue to talk. But staying with this kind of same talking about the rebel group or the resistance versus the very, this imperialistic regime of just like awful not even leadership, just like dictatorship, essentially.
Yeah.
Do you believe that 20 years, roughly, I don't think Fedra immediately took over the QZ zone and were just absolute nightmares from day one. I think things like that are gradual and then they explode, essentially. But do you believe that 20 years is too long of a time for a rebel uprising in a place like the Kansas City quarantine zone? Or do you think that Fedra was able to just hold on to this particular real estate for so long due to reasons that we aren't privy to?
I think people will give up a lot for safety and convenience and, all of those things that we sometimes, like now in this weird world we live in, we like trade our privacy for a lot of stuff that is just convenient, right?
Yeah,
so
accept terms.
Right. Yeah. I accept terms. I accept conditions. And so 20 years feels about right, because what would happen is in those beginning few years, there's panic. There is hysteria. There's like, it's just like, can we make it one more day? Right.
Mm-hmm. Clinging to whatever shred of hope is left too.
Right. And I think maybe even a genuine trust in these people as your protectors. Right. Mm-hmm. Then once there is an establishment, right, in terms of this QZ, and it seems like, for better or worse, Fedra did clear the QZ of the infected, right? There were none in the walls, as far as we could tell.
Yeah.
So at that point, when there is a lull and safety, then I think people start to get complacent, maybe start to get a little bit greedy, especially the people in power. And that become the longer you're entrenched, the more you think you can grab, right?
Sure.
And so that's kind of, I think it was cumulative. So like maybe the seeds of it or the spark was at around the 10-year mark, right? Maybe when Kathleen and her brother were obviously 10 years younger than whatever they were, and they're seeing like, this isn't right. Like we have less food to eat. We have less to drink. We're working longer, like whatever the conditions were. Mm-hmm. And it just builds and builds. It's like a powder keg. Like it builds and builds and builds. And then eventually they're like, no. And then you have it. Right. And so, yeah.
Well, we do learn about the more severe things happening in the, killer city, as Henry calls it. Because it wasn't just like, the food dwindling or the desperation that people go to for medicine and so on and so forth.
Yes.
I mean, it included all like, rape and torture and murder and, making examples out of people or groups of people. So this is just, there's that fear too that has to be overcome. And I think you're right. I think the 10-year mark of living this way, of seeing people that you love destroyed, inevitably will destroy you, but also build up certain people to take that leadership role back, essentially, and start amassing a resistance, which is, that's just how it goes. But
yeah,
it was just interesting to me because we only get enough. We only get enough of this in the games. We only get enough of it in the show. It's always just kind of like an after things have gone to shit, we learn just a glimmer of what it really was.
Yeah.
But I was just interested in kind of bringing a little bit of real world history into it, and where that kind of stands, and that will also continue out through this episode. But yes, Andrew, you're up next.
All right. We see a bunch of civilians as captives, and Kathleen enters this holding cell, right? These people do not look very happy. They look, I dare say they look sullen. They look dejected. They look crestfallen.
I knew it. I knew it.
There is blood splattered on the walls with like bunk beds. And it's like very clearly like the shittiest prison conditions you could imagine, right? That's where these people are being held. She sits before them, and Perry speaks first. And she says that she was once afraid of you people, right? And we're looking at these people, and there's like, well, it's not like they are necessarily large or imposing people, and it's women, it's men, it's, you know, everyone is represented here in this group. And you're like, why would she be afraid of these people? And then she asks if it felt good when they betrayed their fellow residents by going to Fedra in exchange for medicine, food, apples, right? She calls out apples specifically, which I thought was really, really interesting. She's hammering this home with how it was then and how it is now, right? It's a real, you know, how the turntables have turned, you know? She lies here, right? And says that we are not Fedra, right? It's a promise. We're not Fedra. Luckily for you, we're not Fedra. Mm-hmm. They're going to go on trial. They'll all be guilty, and they'll do time. But first, she needs to know where Henry is. Before we can kickstart this process, we're going to hold you here in our little tiny Guantanamo situation. Just tell me where Henry is, and we can get the proceedings going. Mm-hmm. She like snaps at these people. It sounds like a gunshot, right? No one answers her. No, like you're like, oh, so maybe like a little honor among thieves situation. All these people who were informants, they'll rat on these people when it benefits them, but they won't rat on each other.
Yeah.
She tells Perry to kill them, and that sparks somebody that pipes up. It's like, okay, I know Henry's location, right? He tells Henry, he says Henry is with Edelstein, who we presume is the doctor who she shot in the previous episode, rather. Mm-hmm. She learns Edelstein was a collaborator, which was news to her. More info on Henry's whereabouts with Edelstein. But she states that Kansas City is free. But clearly to us, it's not really.
Yeah.
She doesn't know where exactly they're hiding, though. This guy says, I know that he's with Edelstein, and I know that he's in the city, but we never knew where, right? And he swears. So she leaves the holding cage, and she orders her men to search for Henry and Sam. And then Perry questions this, but her sarcasm bites back before she gets right to it. Like, finding Henry is her top priority, right? The way she phrased it was great. She's like, is finding Henry my 7th priority? Or like whatever she said. No, it's number 1. She's fantastic. And then we find out that they are not putting the informers on trial. She just sends all of the rest of the soldiers in and tells them to burn the bodies. I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Madness.
Mm-hmm. But before moving on to the next section, so there will be more of what I'm about to talk about in the spoiler section of this show. Remember, at the end, we talk about game-specific spoilers that relate to what is in this episode. I really have to put that in the beginning of the show, so I don't have to explain it when we get to a comment. But Kathleen and Perry's dynamic mirrors 2 characters that are that we meet in part 2. Mm. So if you are curious to know who I'm talking about or what the similarities of that dynamic, just listen at the end. If you don't want to know, skip it. But
future spoilies. What?
Sure I understand.
Oh my God.
Siri
was listening. Siri was just listening the whole time. What the hell?
Siri's like, anyway. I don't understand. Why would they do this?
Oh my God. But so we see armed men entering the cell, and of course this is after the scene when Kathleen basically tells Perry to, take care of it, burn the bodies. But these armed men with Perry leading them enter the cell to the sounds of panic and screams. And we know what's going to happen. We don't need to see it. And I just wanted to take a moment to just point out the fact that the show does an excellent job not beating us over the head with exposition in scenes like that.
Yeah.
And because we know the horror, we know what's going to happen. It's enough to just give us a scream. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think other shows would do well to remember that. That's all.
It's a smart thing to do budgetarily also, right?
Yes.
And it's also whatever you imagine is probably worse than what actually happened. You know what I'm saying? It's like one of those things. They do it in horror movies a lot too, where they won't show everything, and it's so smart. So it's just like props. It saves money in the budget. They just do a little Foley work, and you just hear it, and then like your brain is like, oh my God, those poor people, So pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely agree. But we are now with Henry and Sam. So Henry and Sam enter a building, and he has a key to this building, so he locks the door. They go up quietly. There are sounds of gunshots outside, and they enter the attic that we saw in the previous episode and meet up with Edelstein here, which, of course, is the doctor.
Yes.
So, again, these are events from the beginning of this episode. These are events that have taken place prior to what we've already seen. And they do a good job not hitting us over the head with that. It's just like this happened before episode 4, but it all flows very nicely. So pacing is wonderful. But we learn about a guard who told Edelstein about this attic space, this quiet place, who is now dead by the sounds of it, this Fedra guard. But Henry unpacks food as they go over all of these details, and then he begins to kind of muse over how much time they have and how long they can withstand in this hideaway. They don't have any ammo or food beyond what is already available to them, so they make a plan to sneak their way out through the city, through these tunnels. There are 20 cans, 6 pounds of jerky for 3 of them shared, and so long as they ration appropriately, should last about 11 days. So they have 11 days to figure out how to sneak out of this heavily guarded psycho city. And it is not going to be easy. The doctor comments on Sam being scared here because Henry is scared. And this is a really good example of how, or this is a good show of how leading by example is very important when it comes to children and stories that involve children. And we get our introduction to Super Sam here, of course. And Sam is Sam shows Henry a self-portrait of himself wearing a mask on the magnetic toy / board that he uses to draw and communicate with non-ASL folk.
Yeah.
So Sam and Henry talk here about their safety, and Henry reassures Sam that he's not afraid. You know, he can't say that everything's going to be okay, but he can say that I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
But the place could use some sprucing up. And that's, of course, with Sam's infamous artwork. And from here, we jump forward 10 days, and we're greeted with a whole art gallery of super artwork adorning the walls. And Henry is peeking through the windows. He pulls the cardboard away to see what's going on outside. But Sam is hungry, and there's only 1 can of Puritan beef stew left. And Henry says, no, they have to have it later. And Sam, just briefly goes back to painting his super self. And Henry is noticing a lot of activity outside. But Sam distracts him again because he's hungry. And Henry just kind of looks to the unlit lantern that hangs above this attic space. Like their supplies, their resources are tapped.
Yeah.
They're gone. And now Sam is sleeping. Military vehicles are still driving outside. It's morning now. It's the next day. And Henry wakes Sam and tells him that Edelstein is not coming back. And, I might have bypassed that conversation, and I apologize. Sam was hungry, but also questioning, like, where is he? Meaning the doctor. And again, Henry does what he has to do and reassures his little brother because he doesn't want that fear placed on a child. But by the next morning, it's like, well, I have to tell him the truth now. We've run out of food. We need to leave. But Henry, this whole, week plus, we can assume, has been watching and has learned their patterns, meaning the rebels. And he believes that they can make it on foot. But he also, believes that the doc was likely killed by these rebels. And Sam's response to hearing this news is to hug Henry, and they just kind of hold on to one another for a moment. But then Henry looks around the walls during this embrace, and he sees one superhero after the next, and he knows that this is his brother's comfort. This is where he can pour his energy into this kind of cosmic, unreal fantasy of of a situation that is quite the opposite of it. So Henry uses this and tells his brother to close his eyes, not too tight, and he paints them and the bridge of his nose with a red superhero mask. And Sam sees his reflection in the blade of a knife, and it brings a wide smile to his face. And Henry gets Sam's jacket onto him. It's time to pack. It's time to leave. Let's go. But first he pulls a table over once they're Once they're downstairs, he pulls a table over and looks up and outside, and we get the best shot, the best cinematographer moment of this entire show so far, in my opinion. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But he tells Sam that it's okay outside, only to then hear a whole lot of sound and a car crashing through some sort of building, followed by gunfire and a whole lot of profanity. And Henry peeks through that same window again at the coin laundromat, which is, of course, where Joel and Ellie crash through. And he sees Joel taking out some of the rebels with his rifle. And after he watches Joel kill the last of that small group of men, Joel's eyes actually go right to Henry's, which causes Henry to dip below the pain again. And Sam asks what's going on because he, of course, does not know. He can't see. And Henry simply just says, new plan. But before we get to that new plan, a lot happens in this attic in a short amount of time. So to just do a really quick rundown, like Edelstein stows away the Burrell brothers. They make a plan to exit the city through the tunnels within 11 days. Otherwise, they're just out of luck, out of food. The doctor dies around presumably day 9 to 10. And then Henry gives Sam his superhero wings before making the hard decision that it's time for them to leave. And all of this to say, I think the narrative work, and we talk about this quite often, but it was executed expertly. And the relationship shared between these brothers is depicted in such a new way, with Sam being deaf, that it soars.
Yeah.
I think this entire, even though it's short, it soars and just leaps off the screen for me. And him and Henry making his little brother feel safe in probably what is the deadliest situation they have ever found themselves in to date is a testament to Lamar Johnson's abilities. And Lamar Johnson is the actor who plays Henry. So
yeah.
This interaction, it is a dialogue. It is just enough information for us, the viewer, to know what is going on, to see their situation, and then to see the progression of how dire their situation has become. On Wayfarer and Strangers, I talked a lot about the Henry and Sam sections. They weren't too long, but of course we broke them up. And I remember saying to you that if there were two characters that Joel and Ellie could keep and have with them the entire journey, it would be Henry and Sam.
Of course. And
this section in particular, this scene, this sequence in the attic reinforced that for me, because and then it continues to be reinforced throughout this entire episode, despite knowing what was going to happen.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something special with the story of Henry and Sam all by itself, but then when you add it into The Last of Us as a whole and the influence on Joel and Ellie and the relationship with Joel and Ellie that Henry and Sam share, it was paramount, and the show just brought that and then some, and I felt that already in this scene.
It's really wonderful what the show is doing to us through side characters, right? So we have Bill and Frank, which would be a mirror for Joel and Tess, essentially. I mean, I know that what we eventually end up getting is that Bill tells him to protect the one that you love, or the one that means the most to you. And that eventually, that transfers to Ellie, right? But he was referring to Tess.
Of course.
And so through this incredible side character story, we hold a mirror up to our protagonists, at least at the time, as far as Bill was concerned. In this episode, we are very much doing the same exact thing. The reason why we love these two is because we are seeing our protagonists reflected in them as well.
Yeah.
Although they have a completely different set of circumstances, the goal and the relationship remain very, very similar, right? An older protector and a younger but very capable, despite circumstances, person as well.
Yeah.
And that's what actually makes this like a very difficult episode. And
Yes,
not unlike
it
Bill
really
and Frank
does.
as well. Like very, very sad. Like I'm happy to have watched it, but god damn. and again, as we try not to reference it too much, but as players of the game, we knew that this was going to happen. And it wasn't exactly how it happened, but it was close enough. And you're like, oh my gosh, it still hits like a ton of bricks. So, yeah.
And of course we're going to keep with Henry and Sam for a while, but that shot that I mentioned, the superhero shot of Henry moments after he painted his brother's eyes with a red mask. I remember seeing it the first time I watched the show and appreciating it for how absolutely stunning of a shot it was. It didn't click until the second time. I was like, oh my God, they put a red mask, a red band, a red mask over Henry's eyes in the way of a reflection from the coin laundromat that Joel and Ellie's truck crashed into. And it was the first scene. So, and I knew it. I instantly sought it out after watching the episode ended. I immediately went onto Twitter and I just searched Henry and Sam.
Yeah.
And it pulled up that photo and that's where it clicked in my head. And I was like, that's what it is. Like, I knew it was something significant, but it was so fast and you're just trying to enjoy the show and not necessarily process in the moment, of course, because that's why we do rewatches for this episode. But the fact that Henry gave Sam his superhero moment and then immediately had one all of his own without him even knowing.
Yeah.
And knowing what he does.
Yeah.
Damn this show.
It's great. I mean, that's a show that's clearly firing on all cylinders. And that a lesser show or a show with a different set of people might have overlooked this potentially very great minor fleeting detail, but not this show. They're like, oh, we can create another symmetry here. And it's great to see.
And that was, again, Eben Bolter, who did episode 4. He was the cinematographer for 5 as well. I'm
going to reach out to that dude and be like, look, man, can we just chat with you? I have about 7. I've saved about 600 screenshots from the first 4 episodes. I would just love to go through each one of these with you and tell me what you were thinking. And I'll take copious amounts of notes.
Yeah. It's like, you know what, to compare it to the impact of that moment with Henry for our listeners. If you are fans of Breaking Bad, you might know where I'm going with this. I believe it was in Ozymandias.
Okay.
The dent, the bullet hole dent on the back of the car and Walt's reflection of a bullet hole in his head.
Yeah.
That is the same level of genius, like just the awareness of your environment and the way that you use light. It's stunning. I literally wish that I had that gift. I truly do. But, it was.
I think a lot of that happens on set, though, where they can... That's the collaborative nature of film and TV, is that you can... The best laid plans, and then you get there. They say, like, a movie... Like, it applies to television, too, but, like, a movie is made 3 times. It's made when you write it, it's made when you make it, and it's made when you edit it. And those are 3 different movies, right?
Sure.
And so that's my favorite. That's actually my favorite part of it is, and also sometimes the worst part is like, because what was written might not be what was delivered. And you're like, oh, but the premise was so good. Here, it seems to me that they knew specifically that like the mask is getting painted on, and that was maybe in the script on the page in a storyboard, right? But this thing, because you don't know how the you don't necessarily know how the production design is going to put this whole thing together, right?
Yeah.
But then
like, will it be red?
Yeah. When you walk into the set, and I'm assuming, well, that actually might have been a practical outdoor. I know like later on that was.
It was.
Oh, that on the street with the laundromat and stuff. So you don't know what they're going to do to those buildings in terms of dress them. But then you're there as Eben Bolter or Craig or whoever's directing, and you're like, oh, look at this. like, that reminds me of the thing we shot weeks ago, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It's really, you love to see it is what I always say.
Yeah. It's a genius. And I think going back to when we interviewed Jeffrey Pierce for On Wayfair and Strangers, who of course, Jeffrey Pierce is the original Tommy Miller in the games. And he is Perry in the HBO show.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Pierce talked about every single person working on this show is there because they fucking love The Last of Us. And they brought their A game and then some. And it continues. Every episode we see continues to reinforce that statement.
Yeah.
That Jeffrey gave us. And again, I knew I was going to spend a lot of time on that shot. Thank you guys for allowing us to do that.
Yeah, it is cool. Just not to belabor the point, but to re-listen to his interview after having seen what he was involved in is like so fucking cool. Because like I believed him when he said it, right? Like when he was like, "This is for like whatever you think know about. It's way better than that." And then he was involved in two of kind of like the biggest set piece episodes that we've seen so far.
Sure.
And you're like, that actually, I mean, like the dude was right. Like they rebuilt this cul-de-sac that's like a massive part from the game, like a massive section. And you're like, see, he was there. That must have been so cool. I love that stuff.
I know. We got to get him back on the show. Hopefully.
I think he seems amenable to it. We'll just get him for another half hour. Be like, Perry, no.
I know. We'll talk about that shortly. Last talking point before moving on. So I do enjoy the quote unquote seeing the same events we've already seen, but from a different perspective angle.
Yeah.
I will say that I prefer this to be done in short bursts, and I find that that's more wildly successful. Like it's being done on this show. They're short bursts. We're not doing hours and hours of this.
Yeah.
But when it's done too often, I feel like it can be like this sloggy redundancy when it comes to storytelling. And you like the word you love using, belabor. Like it belabors the overall arc of something if you do it too often. However, I do understand why they're doing it in this series specifically, and particularly in season 1 now. But we will talk more about this in the game spoiler section. Yeah. Because we can't.
They do this a lot. It's one of my favorite things also when done well. It's sometimes referred to as like Rashomon style that's like a film. But to see the same events from a different perspective, from a different character's perspective, like, Sam and Henry don't necessarily know where Joel and Ellie went. Just kind of like, they were like, oh, they're in the laundromat, then they went out that way or whatever.
Yeah.
That, I think they pulled that off expertly. You see it a lot in like heist films. Like, oh, we thought that this was, but then now we look at this way and there's something completely different happening. So
yeah,
pretty good.
Very, very good.
All right. We're going to move on here. We're outside the same building that Joel boosted Ellie up into at the end of Please Hold to My Hand. Sam and Henry, they enter and climb quietly into this building. The brothers walk and tread on the glass that Joel broke. So it is funny because they do make noise. Like even at this point, which is way outside of where Joel, I mean, how much glass did Joel break? It's like he covered entire hallways with glass. It's a lot of glass. Very careful. And yet did not wake him up.
Well, he fell asleep on his right ear because
That's right.
he didn't sleep the night before.
Yeah. So Henry instructs Sam before handing him a pistol as they approach the door. He's like, we're going to do this.
Or left ear, sorry.
Yeah. We are now in present day again with Ellie yelling to wake Joel up. Henry wants Joel's eyes on him as Sam points the gun at Joel. Yeah. Henry and Sam don't want to hurt, but rather help them. They make it pretty clear right from the get.
Sure.
We go through assurances here, right? If they lower their weapons, no one was hurt, so no one needs to get hurt. I actually like this de-escalation. I found that to be kind of an interesting, we don't see that a lot. It's generally like this trope goes, we lower our weapons and an immediate rush happens, right? But that was not the case here.
But that's the beauty of Henry and Sam. Henry in particular, that's what we talked about on the show. There is a absolute quiet leadership quality to Henry that I think had we had the time to explore that with him, oh man.
Yeah.
Like what a beauty. He was just a beautifully well-rounded character, and he brought something that no other character will ever and has ever brought to the Last of Us storyline.
Yeah. I 100% believe that. Yeah. And it comes through even in this very brief window that we have with them. So
yeah.
Joel agrees to these assurances, but he does so with what is referred to as an asshole voice. Does he always sound like that? Or I can't remember. It was like very, very funny. Ellie calls him out on it twice, which was great. Henry starts to spiral a bit, but in the end, he has to trust Joel and Ellie. But if they try anything, he will do what he has to do, right? Ellie watches Henry and Sam communicate here. So with the American Sign Language. Joel and Ellie agree that nothing will go bad, all right? Joel sits up very slowly after requesting to do so and asks who they are. Henry tells Joel their names and that he is the most wanted man in Kansas City, but that Joel and Ellie are a very close second, which is what a great way to introduce yourself, right? I'm the most wanted man in Kansas City. That's so cool.
Yeah.
After this, we see Joel and Ellie framed by one of the broken panes to the office door. Just another great kind of cinematography moment here. All four are huddled around a lantern and they are sharing food. Henry asks where Joel got their food. Ellie says, Bill, he's dead. And it was such a great deadpan moment. She was just giving facts, like, no further questions. Right? It was funny. Joel hands the last bits of his food to Sam, which was beautiful. Henry translates Sam's gratitude here. We learn that Sam is 8, and then Ellie shares her name, right? Joel is silent, and Ellie slaps his leg, and he gets right to business, right? He's like shares his name, then he tells them,
Joel.
Yeah, Joel, he's like, all right, fine, like very reluctantly, but then he tells them it's time to move on. They didn't kill each other, and they ate. So, like, let's just go our separate ways, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Henry calls Joel on his bullshit here, though. He knows that they're up here to get a view of the city. And it's a very intuitive thing that Henry, he's like, not necessarily, but like Henry, I'm sure the thought process is like, that's what I would do if I was up here, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like, scout. And it's very cool that he's already on that level with Joel, kind of, But Henry says he's like, don't worry about finding a way out. I'll show you the way out in the morning. But let's dive into this here a little bit.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, Sam and Henry are so quiet in comparison to Joel and Ellie as they walked up through the stairs of this building.
Yeah.
And I know that has to do with the lack, there's no need for the spoken word between Sam and Henry. But even their footsteps felt softer. Like they just move through this world a little quieter overall. And it's a polarization to what we've seen. And it shows the benefits of what just being a little bit quieter in a world like this can get you.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been alive Sam's 8 and Henry was 25 in the games. I don't know how old Henry is in the show, but I would say probably between 25 and 30 still.
Yeah.
And it just, we don't know what their life was like before, but this is really the first time we can assume that they're on their own and just trying to survive. But I think you've been talking about intuition. I think their intuition is excellent, and Henry's in particular. And I think that comes from the decision to make Sam be deaf, to have Sam deaf, because that adds that layer of something nuanced in this world that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
In The Last of Us. And again, just continues to build on the character that we've been loving very hard on since the beginning of the show.
There is a great mirroring as well in that Sam, I'm sorry, Sam, right? The youngest. Yeah. Is deaf, and yet there are monsters in this world that rely solely on sound as a location device. Again, so there are many levels down of mirroring that are happening here. Mm-hmm. And to introduce a character, I feel like they move quieter through the world, specifically Sam, as a direct result of knowing that not only is he at what you might consider a disadvantage in this world, right, where many things are like listening for you, right? Mm-hmm. But also because what if he were to get separated from his brother, right? Yeah, he would have to be crafty. He would have to be stealthy, and I think that's just what he was taught. Like make as you should leave and no one would know you're there, right? That's the kind of impression that they, if you have to make a quick escape, no tracks, right? Yeah. And that feels very much like a thing that Joel and Ellie might have a discussion about as well. So again, we have all these great parallels. Mm-hmm.
And so I know I'm jumping way ahead to the end of the episode, but I just don't want to forget this talking point. And I can't remember if I wrote it down, so I just want to talk about it. But you talked about the other side of infected versus Sam. Mm-hmm. So we can presume that, like, we know Sam gets infected and that he turns, but that doesn't change the fact that he cannot hear. So when Ellie wakes up and says, hey, he can't hear her, so he doesn't attack her.
Right.
So nobody in the other room wakes up faster. So Joel didn't get there faster to save Ellie, and maybe Joel might have been the one to kill Sam, and then Henry would have fucking killed Joel and Ellie. Like, all of these things didn't happen because Sam is deaf, and even as an infected kid, he still did not have the capability to hear Ellie simply say, hey. Yeah. It wasn't until she touched him that changed the events.
Yeah. So
and put them by the door.
Exactly. It's they do. It's an inspired choice, not only because we got to experience that actor's performance as Sam, and I'm spacing on his name right now, but
Kevon Woodard, excuse me, he's amazing.
I feel like we're very sad at the end of the episode, obviously, and you're just like, oh my God, and then you watch presumably you watched the post-show thing, and I got all emotional watching that. I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it, where he's like, I'm represented here. And I was like, you got me. Yes. It was just beautiful. It's just beautiful to see. Yeah. It's not trying to change him fundamentally. It's like, we want you represented as you. Yes. And they talk about how everyone learned ASL on the it was incredible. It's truly incredible.
It really, really was. Just a brilliant decision on Craig Mazin's behalf.
Yeah.
Little bit of a TV ass shit moment.
Okay.
And I know that there's a kind of a throwaway comment in the next section that we're going to get to, but how did Sam and Henry know that Joel and Ellie were on the 33rd floor specifically? In the next section, Henry talks about how Joel and Ellie basically made it easy for him and Sam to follow them.
Sure.
Because he knows the whole city. But that aside, we didn't see Henry and Sam see Joel and Ellie enter that building and be, boosted up and so on and so forth. And how would he know specifically out of 45 floors, 33 is where they got up? So again,
footsteps in the dust, Maybe when the door swung open, it like created a little push some dust aside, right? It's all these little things that we don't think about. 20 years of sitting. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, well, the door, he wouldn't have noticed the dust because the door was at the end of the hallway and there was a line of glass.
No, I mean the door from the steps. Because if they just went up the same set of steps, right?
Oh,
they just would have followed the footsteps up the step. I mean,
assuming to see where they stopped.
Right. Where did the footsteps end? I mean, it could be that, right? And that's all I'll say is that was my only thought. I was like, jumping back 10 10 minutes in the episode too. Just a throwaway line is like when Henry's like, I memorize their patterns, right? It's like, that's a video game thing. It's like you watch how they move and patrol. And then we have this thing where it's like a TV-esque shit. It's just like a very cool, I love that stuff. I love it.
No, you're right. I did not consider that element. And I can almost bet, and I could be wrong, but
that's why we bet.
There has to be a shot of Joel and Ellie walking up, and even if it's a split second, like their boots or sneakers or whatever, leaving a print.
There might be.
And I just didn't see it and put it together. So, all right.
It's a dark show, you know.
It is a dark show, yeah.
As some of our listeners have pointed out, it's like it's a very dark show, not just thematically, visually, sometimes as well.
But so the whole kind of hostage situation that Joel and Ellie wake up and find themselves in. So this moment shows how inexperienced Henry is with this type of situation.
Sure.
But despite that, he's very transparent with his inexperience. And to be honest with you, I feel like that is why they lived and why Joel didn't do anything. Because he trusted them, because he could recognize that this guy does not know what he's doing. So he is not a threat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Without spoiling, I don't think it's too much. I don't think it's anything. It's we don't see a lot of kids in this world, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's also that recognition there of like, oh, he's got a kid with him, and I have and Henry on the other side of that said, oh, he's got a kid with her, right?
Well, yeah, that happens in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was saying. I was going to, a very mild spoiler for just like a piece of offhanded dialogue that happens. They didn't address it specifically in this, but I think that that's also part of it, where it's just like Henry recognizes that this person is a protector of this person. I'm a protector of this person. So we have something of an aligned interest here, right? Our goal is just to keep these people safe. And we find out just in a moment that he assumes that's his daughter. Ellie is his daughter. And they shoot that shit down real quick. But very, very cool. Again, it's nuance and observation. And I think knowing that Henry was, or what we're about to learn, I guess, or did he already say that he was an informant? It doesn't matter. It seems like his job was to observe things, to be very observant of behaviors and patterns and stuff like that. So it stands to reason that he made a very quick and correct judgment about Joel.
Yeah. Well, and that also brings up, like, when you talk about the actual, like, our senses as a human being, the person that he spent the most amount of time with over the last 8 years was his brother. Mm-hmm. So when one sense goes, there's that kind of, well, the other ones get, more time and attention to, so they become better.
Yeah.
And I think that might also be the case with Henry by proxy. He didn't have this need to be noisy and talking constantly and just, filling the world with sound, essentially, because it wasn't necessary with the person he's closest to. Mm-hmm. So instead, he just used his eyesight, his sense of sight, and put all of his energy into paying attention to things.
Yeah.
And I think that reinforces what we've been talking about, and that intuition and that knowing and that assurance. And why, again, Joel didn't immediately kill them, and why Henry recognized an inherent good to Joel and Ellie's situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Very smart. Very smart. And Joel's disinterest in getting to know Sam and Henry first, even showing a little bit of annoyance that Ellie shares her name, much to Ellie's delight, as she watches Henry sign her name to Sam in real time, which was just also a beautiful moment, is very similar to the game's dynamic here.
Yeah.
So, we've been talking a little bit like, well, Joel was a little bit softer in episode 4. Like, he's just he's more vulnerable. He's more emotionally available. This episode, while that's still true in certain senses, and when we see that exploited a lot during the firefight at the end, he's a little bit more shut down again because these two new people came into the fold.
Right.
But then he warms up slowly and comes around, and I just think that they did a good job. They do a good job of like pulling the reins and then loosening the reins and pulling the reins and loosening the reins, depending on the character, depending on what the situation is, and they make it very believable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I love Joel's innate trust, or distrust rather, and how it extends to everyone from the get-go. And this is just kind of an add-on to what we just talked about. Like, his asshole voice is a perfect way to sum up Joel's, for lack of a better expression, stranger danger. Yeah. Because he's just not interested in going through this world with a group or with people or that heavy burden of responsibility of taking care of others, even though that is literally what he is and who he is.
Yeah. I feel like that's just a result of so many years of having the other shoe drop for him that we don't know, or maybe we'll find out about in a later piece of story. But you're like, yeah, we're just going to start from a place of distrust, and then it needs to be earned, right? And I for this world, seems like a pretty fair play.
Yeah. Yeah. But on to the next section. So it is morning, and we get a view of, quote, Killer City, as Henry calls it. And this is, of course, the Kansas City QZ. Joel notes that there's no Fedra and has always heard that Kansas City was overrun by, quote, monsters and savages. And Henry confirms this. But, of course, he's not talking about the infected. And Henry outs himself to Joel here as a collaborator, and Joel says he doesn't work with rats. But Henry, once again, calls Joel on his bullshit. Because, yes, Joel, you will work with a rat. Or, this isn't the first time directly before. I wouldn't say the first time it was a direct call on his bullshit, but anyway. But Henry has the upper hand here because he knows the city, and he knows that he will be able to basically enlist Joel and Ellie to help them get out of Kansas City because of their expertise, or Joel's expertise specifically, married with his. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a perfect match thing happening here. And Henry says that he will help them because he saw what Joel did. He killed those men, and he needs that to help them escape, all of them. But Henry admits here that he never killed anyone, and the unloaded gun that he pointed at Joel is the closest he's ever been to being violent. So they agree to work together here. Mm-hmm. Well, he agrees to work together here. And then they hear the kids laughing off to the back of them, and they both turn to look. And Sam and Ellie are having a good old time together, laughing and smiling as they look or read from a book. I think it was the joke book, the no pun intended book.
Yeah, she had the book out. Yeah.
Yeah. And Henry doesn't turn away during this very delightful sequence, but Joel does. And then he simply asks how they're getting out of here. And Henry draws a pretty, hastily draws a map of the surrounding highways to where they are in downtown KC. And the whole area belongs to Kathleen, who is, of course, now the leader of the resistance. And there are people posted everywhere, so they will need to take the tunnels. And these are maintenance tunnels. And it's an interconnected system of commercial buildings and more, and beyond that all of these tunnels can be accessed through, so they'll be able to sneakily bypass the rebels. Mm-hmm. So basically what it comes down to is commercial building to the tunnels, to a residential area, to an embankment, to a pedestrian bridge, to home free. Yes. And Joel says that it's a great plan, but why him? And Henry shares that the lack of infected above ground doesn't mean that there aren't any infected anywhere, essentially. Anywhere. Yeah, because that's brought up here as well. The absence of the infected in the QZ. And Henry shares that this happened because Fedra drove them underground about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But everyone thinks the tunnels are full of infected, so there's this kind of misunderstanding going on. And this includes Kathleen. But they're not. These tunnels are empty. And this was told to Henry by a Fedra guy who used to work with him.
Yeah.
I don't know in what capacity, but there we go.
Work.
But I'm assuming this. Yeah, I'm assuming it's the same Fedra soldier who told him about the addict.
Yeah.
So
safe assumption.
Yeah, but the tunnels were cleaned out years ago, And Henry has his faith strengthened here when he finds out that Ellie and Joel have faced clickers already and come out of that situation alive. Because, yeah, Joel and Ellie are the right people, and Henry can deduce as much. And says it's basically their only shot. And Sam, at this moment, asks what's going on, and Henry simply ends the conversation with, "They're going to help us escape."
It was so funny. It was such a
really
great
was.
moment. They are going to help us escape. And he's signing. And Joel, the look that Joel gives him, I was like, I was dying. It was so funny.
It was so good. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. So Kansas City having this reputation that extends far across the country is bone-chilling to me. The fact that Fedra operated this torture camp, essentially, for so long before a resistance was finally able to rise above is a scary thought, and one that is hugely believable given what we know of people in positions of power. Not necessarily people who are accustomed to power, but people who just suddenly find themselves with it and no one to check them, essentially. And I think, you know, these Fedra soldiers, I would say that the original group of Fedra might not have been the evil bastards from the get-go.
Sure.
They might have still believed that they were helping these people, but then as the months and the years wore on and desperation came to everyone, Fedra became the worst faction of all. Not even a military branch anymore.
Sure.
Just another nasty faction trying to oppress people and exploit the vulnerabilities. That's what people do. In positions of power who abuse them, you exploit the vulnerabilities of people that you view as weaker than yourself.
Yeah. I think this might be a little unfair to the people of Kansas City if you're listening, but I did apologies in advance. I'm going to say it anyway, though. I did a search for Kansas City known for ...
Oh no!
Can you guess? I found three things. Can you guess? Can you guess one of them? One of them is pretty obvious, and I would love to go. I would love to experience it. You have no guesses?
The Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs.
None of that. I'm talking about broadly, like broadly.
No, I really don't know anything.
You do know it. You just forgot it. Barbecue. Okay. Oh. Ted Lasso, barbecue sauce.
Oh yeah.
Right. He's from Kansas City. They're known for barbecue widely. They are actually also known for jazz, which was news to me. Right.
Interesting.
And then they are known also for a very popular crime family. There's the mob, apparently, mafia, whatever you want to, is like, I don't know this for sure. The internet, but apparently the mafia is pretty active in Kansas City. Oh, like great. The Savelli, or there's like a name, a family name was like dropped in my very cursory search of what Kansas City is known for.
Maybe we should bleep that out.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I feel no fear. Yeah. So that just learning that, I was like, that would be interesting if, again, it's not made clear in this episode, but if they had somehow parlayed that like a city that has a known criminal element had somehow worked its way into Fedra. And those were the people at the top of the food chain.
Interesting.
Again, it could literally be nothing.
That's a lot of assumptions, though, about the mob.
The only reason I say that, though, is because in a search, like, my question was, why Kansas City, right? Because in the game it's Pittsburgh, and think about all of the cities that you could possibly go to on the way from Boston to Wyoming, right? And they chose Kansas City specifically. And again, it could literally be nothing. But me, a layperson who knows very little about Kansas City, in a search for it, very quickly came upon information about a crime syndicate, an alleged crime syndicate. So that's all. I just found that little bit of information to be possibly, this could be something. Could be nothing. Could also be something.
All right. right, interesting. I don't think in case the Kansas City Mafia is listening to us.
I would love to have the barbecue. I would love to just have the barbecue.
Yes. Invite us for the barbecue. We'll leave before shit hits the fan. But I don't think that just because you're in the mob or the mafia means you're inherently predisposed to torture and
I don't
and letting that kind of power and those inside thoughts take over, essentially.
I don't know. I've seen Donnie Brasco. I've seen The Departed. I mean, I've seen a lot of films that would suggest otherwise. The Godfather. Yeah, I don't know.
But those are like, they were wrong. You wronged me somehow, or like it just. I don't necessarily. Listen, I'm from a very Italian family.
You got people coming around. You got collectors.
There's certainly murmuring, in my family, but like not
protection money. We got. I don't want to rule it out. Is all I'm saying. I don't want to rule it out.
All right, so the KC Fedra was funded and run by the mob. Done.
Right, there could have just been they had their own Don Corleone at the top of the pile. I don't know. But
wait, Michael Corleone, because Michael is Kathleen's brother.
That's right.
No, but apparently he was a wuss and never did anything. But anyway, we'll get to that.
That's the opposite of what you need at the top of the. But he was the overthrower as well. I'm talking about the Fedra people. But hey, whatever. Sorry.
Yeah.
Tangent. Enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right. So the tunnels, we are underground. And just a quick little one off here. The thought of going underground in a tunnel system below a city right now, as I'm talking to you, is uncomfortable. The thought alone is an uncomfortable thought. But when you add in the world of The Last of Us, I truly don't, Andrew, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know. I feel like you'd have to I don't know. I mean, if that's the only way, then that's the only way. And everybody pushed to desperation, or the last ditch effort. Like, you have to do what you have to do. But sitting comfortably in a comfortable bedroom, it's like, I can't imagine being like, yeah, I'll willfully do that.
Look, all I'm gonna say, and this is a trope that I see a lot. They're like the tunnels under the city, right? And in this show they explained that it was like the same developer. And it was a way to easily do maintenance, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll buy, suspension of disbelief. I'll buy this, right? However, the tunnels under the city are fucking immaculate. Like, I would live there 100%, right? We've seen this in the other one. The other big offender of this is The Dark Knight Rises. They're like, they're in the tunnels under Gotham. I'm like, it's beautiful down there. Where is all this sunlight pouring in from? Are there just holes in the street? What is happening? That's a waterfall. There was a beautiful waterfall down here. What is going on? And so, that's just like that's the magic of movies, that we just believe that there's like a tunnel that it's like friggin' this magical land down there.
Yeah.
That's not really what tunnels look like. And they certainly wouldn't be, accommodate 7 people wide, right? It's like one person or like a golf cart to go to the next part. So
yeah,
I'm just saying, those tunnels look like pretty secure. I would live in those tunnels 100%.
We have a thing on Wayfair and Strangers where we talk about fortified locations.
Yeah.
We have a running list.
These tunnels.
As afraid as I would be initially, I could do it.
I got that list around here on a Post-it note somewhere. Here it is. I can't actually hold this up to the camera. Oh, wait, I can cover this up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the phone number.
There's a phone number on the bottom. I don't even know whose phone number. Prison, church, high school, aircraft carrier. That was Jack's. A lighthouse, and not a coffee shop. So
not a coffee. No, they would not be great.
Not a coffee shop. You just bust right through the front window, and then your coffee dreams are over.
Do you know, and this is the last tangent, I promise, for this section.
Fair.
Do you know, we haven't podcasted all week. This is what happens. The subway where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles lived.
Of course, yeah. That's another one.
In The Secret of the Ooze.
Yeah.
When they just like turn the lights on and it's just this like beautiful, warm presentation. Like, as a child, I was like, I fucking want to live down there.
Right.
And now, as an adult, I'm like, I could do that.
Right. I would make that work, could fit a lot of IKEA furniture down there. We could have dedicated spaces for shit. Same thing with the tunnels here. Same thing with the tunnels in The Dark Knight Rises. You're like, that over there, that ward, you know?
I know. They were like fucking 6 stories tall.
Yeah.
And listen, I know underground.
We have 700 people that live over there, you know?
There are like subways beneath subway, like subsections beneath subs. It's creepy when you think about how much actual empty space could be underneath you walking in a fucking city.
Yeah.
That bothers me.
You don't have, I mean, don't be bothered by it. It's you know,
anyway. It's
fine. It's just weird. It is a weird thing. We see it all the time. We just accept it. But it's not, I was like, it's based on zero real world, you know, it doesn't make any sense. You know, the ceilings here is 100 feet tall.
And look at the chandeliers.
We've wasted so much. Why did we dig all this out? Structurally, it makes no sense. That's all.
Why don't we live down here?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I feel like I've already kind of talked about this, but the full embodiment of Henry is especially noticeable here. And earlier it was as well in the last bit of conversation with Joel and Ellie. So he's already making that assumption and telling his brother, like, they're going to help us because I've got your number, dude. Mm-hmm. And it's comforting for those of us who have loved Sam and Henry for so long now to see Lamar Johnson and Kevon Woodard step fully into these reimagined roles and give us so much more.
Yeah. Role of a lifetime. I mean,
really,
wish we would have had more time with them, but truly the role of a lifetime.
I agree.
All right, I'm going to talk about these tunnels, these magical tunnels, these Narnia-esque tunnels that we go into here. We go into a rundown bank building. It's in broad daylight, and the 4 of them head towards where Henry thinks the tunnel entrance is. And we go, right? Yeah. Once inside, there's a service access. Joel tells Ellie to get her gun out, which is a first, maybe, I think. Instead of saying, put that thing away, it's like, take that thing out. We are going to need it potentially. Yeah. They open a fortified door. Joel checks first, make sure everything's clear and on the up and up. Henry celebrates that it's empty and the plan is good, but Joel shuts that down real quick. He's like, it's only been like 2 seconds, right? So we don't know shit about what's in these tunnels. Henry comments a little sassy here, and this is great. He's like, your dad's kind of a pessimist. It's like Joel and Ellie almost, it's identical at the same exact time. He's not my dad. I'm not her dad, right? At the same exact time. Mm-hmm. Joel orders them to point their light forward and be ready to run if need be. Yeah. Air whirls through the tunnel. There are metal pipes. It's like very atmospheric. It's like great production and sound design married here in this. And there's a very hollow echo thing that's happening. Again, sound was on point for this one. Yeah. A lot of nothing. And lots of nothing down here. Mm-hmm. Then we're greeted with like a something that would certainly stand out. It's like a beautifully painted vestibule area before this heavy looking door. You're like, what is this? And Sam approaches the entrance without thinking. And his face is alight, and it's very reminiscent of Frank's smile from episode 3 when he gets food served to him, right? But Joel stops him. He's like, he wants to walk into this place, right? But Joel's like, no, don't, wait, hold on, right? Yeah. Joel goes in first. Very heavy door. It's like the one we just came through earlier to get down to this area, and we're greeted with a full living space underground, right? People who went underground after Outbreak Day and made tiny little settlements. Exactly what I was just referring to. This is great. They likely didn't follow the rules. We see there's like a poster board, like the rules. Yeah. And we find out that they probably didn't follow these rules too well and ended up infected. Ellie and Sam take a seat at the table. Ellie places her pistol and flashlight on top of the table and is covered with toy cars, crayons. She shoves off a car, right? It's really, really great. Joel looks around. He comes across a child's drawing on the wall. It said, Danny and Ish are protectors, which is really nice. Sam finds a Savage Starlight comic on the ground and this delights Ellie to no end. Yeah. She has issues 4, 5, 6, and 11. Sam has 5, 6, and 8. So clearly 5 and 6, they overproduced that episode, that book. We get the iconic line, "To the edge of the universe and back, endure and survive." Ellie says this with Sam and then learns from Sam how to sign it. And it was just like an incredibly beautiful moment between these two. I think the camera is trained on them for a very long time. We're not even seeing Henry and Joel in this moment, and they share like a double high five, and Ellie's like, "Fuck yeah!" It's just great. It's really great. Then they are met with a classic shush style comment from Joel. He's like, "No fun shall be had." They're not out of the woods yet. And the protector, Joel the protector, must remind them. You know, it's a constant thing. He's always like, when's the other shoe going to drop here? Ellie asks to rest a while, and because there's stuff to do here, right? And Henry says this as well. So they want to wait out the light a bit before popping. They're like, we'll just leave when it's dark. This is great. And Joel kind of just agrees with this silently. He doesn't say no, but he doesn't really say yes. He just doesn't say anything. Mm-hmm. Sam and Ellie play soccer. Joel and Henry talk. Joel finds he's like, it's pretty cruel to send a whole army after Henry for a reason that he assumes has everything to do with this little boy, right? Mm-hmm. Henry admits to not telling the whole truth, particularly regarding a great man, which, okay, here it comes. Mm-hmm. Has Joel ever known a man like that? Selfless, someone you'd follow everywhere? Joel does not reply to this, you know? Mm-hmm. He looks a little pensive, though. It's just worth noting the looks. When Joel doesn't say anything, that says a lot, right?
Yes.
We learned Sam was sick with leukemia, and one drug was required, was needed to help him, but it required a big thing for Fedra, right? He was like, Fedra's like, we have it, we'll give it to you, but you need to give us something big.
Yeah.
So Henry gave them the leader of the resistance, who we find out was Kathleen's brother. Henry believes himself a bad guy because he did a bad guy thing, but Henry sees a recognition in Joel that he might not be Ellie's father, but he was someone, and he knows this. Joel understands essentially like what Henry did, right? And why he did it. Mm-hmm. Joel stands and ends the conversation here because things are getting too personal. He just Joels it up. So there we go.
Yeah. And the dad commentary going back. So I love how fast both of them push back to this. Yeah. And it's so similar to the game. But I think there was more of a tone to the show pushback than the game. And I don't really know why. Like, what's the difference between the show and the game in your mind that would lead to them being like, Ellie didn't, like in the game, she didn't sound necessarily, I don't want to use the word disgusted like she did in the show, but she was very quick like, he's not my dad. And I feel like it might have just been more of a teenage reaction in the show.
Yeah.
Whereas Ellie in the game was just kind of like, oh, no, he's not my dad. Like.
Yeah, I just think the sass, I just think this Ellie slightly tweaked a little bit, is a little sassier and a little bit a little bit quippier, maybe. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but like, very much just wants to have the record set straight her way, right? Like, it's not my dad. Like, what are you talking about, guy? Yeah. And we get it from Joel, you know, not my daughter, you know, someone who had a daughter, you know, and is currently going through the process of potentially feeling again for the first time in a long time. He's like, I'm conflicted internally. It's a lot to deal with.
So I'm going to lie.
I'm going to shut it up. I'm going to shut it down. Shut it down.
So, yes. And this next moment, so Joel was quick to get to Sam, but he also physically stopped him rather than speaking the words. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a beautiful thing because it shows Joel's habitual silence in general, but especially in moments of high tension. Like he has has grown accustomed to living his life quieter, not as quiet as Sam and Henry. But I think it also works to not be blatantly ignorant of Sam's deafness.
Right.
And I think most people in the world, even today, most people wouldn't adjust that quickly upon learning that someone in their group or someone in a kind of an intense situation can't hear. There's a lot of like rudeness and assumptions and, you know, people are dumb, essentially. Like they'll talk louder expecting a different result. And it's like, what
Yeah.
are you fucking doing?
Yeah.
And Joel has none of that here. Instead, he stops him with a hand to his chest and then he speaks no. He says no quietly, but then shakes his head very quickly before Sam kind of pushes Henry back behind everyone a bit.
Yeah.
It's not this abrupt, jarring, or dismissive reaction from Joel. And I thought that it was very well done and balanced for what we know of this character and what has been newly presented to him.
Yeah. Just the way that Henry is an observer, Joel is also an observer, and having, I believe his observation here is very likely like this kid is 8, right? He's literally never he's never experienced what this world is like or can be like.
Yeah.
And so there was a kindness to the wait, you could get hurt. Like it was a I don't want to say like a fatherly, but like very much in that energy, right? Like
Sure.
you could get hurt. Just wait. Like that's kind of what it is. I don't want to. I don't want to drive the point home too much. Like referring to Joel as like father, right? But you know,
To everyone.
right? But like he certainly has a protective energy, and it's based, I mean, almost entirely on his lived experience. It has to be. He's like, we don't just 8-year-old kids shouldn't just open doors that have been closed for 20 years. You know, like let me do that. And so, yeah, it was just a really nice. It was a bit of kindness from Joel that it was just. I noted it and I was like, there we go.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
This conversation between Henry and Joel, and Henry recognizing that he did, quote, a bad thing, but for a good reason, is important to many, many themes in The Last of Us.
Sure.
And it's interesting to me, again, that they are hammering home so many of these key elements by way of supporting characters that we know for a very brief time before they're taken away from us.
Yeah.
All of these, Billa and Frank, Tess, Henry and Sam, they're all influences, deep influences on Joel and Ellie. I think while it's done so beautifully, if you look at all 5 episodes, kind of the grand picture of all 5 episodes up to this point, it is a little jarring, the amount of loss that has happened in such a short amount of time and how quickly Joel and Ellie need to adapt and incorporate what they've learned from these people into this new quote unquote normal after every single thing happens and every misfortune happens.
Yeah.
It's a little fast. And I think that that's what I've been kind of talking about here and there. I think things are happening very quickly.
Yeah.
And, you know, I understand that the game had 4 seasons. The first game had 4 seasons to tell us what these characters are going through. And it does a really good job of, you know, when we are in summertime, Joel and Ellie are wearing summertime clothes. When we're in fall, they have light jackets on and the leaves are beginning to turn. When we're in winter, we're wearing our winter gear and there's snow on the ground. Like we have those real world elements that we can relate to, but we are 5 episodes in to season 1 of The Last of Us. And this is supposed to be the whole game. And they have not changed their fucking clothes at all. Like, and now I think between episode 5 and 6, because 6 will take place predominantly in Jackson and they presumably walked, I think there's going to be months that have passed by. They have to jump time Otherwise, this is not going to work.
Yeah. I want to make one note about a thing you mentioned about the loss, right? So like
Sure.
just this episode and episode two, yeah. Really all they have lost is Tess and Sam and Henry, spoilers for later. So like the Bill and Frank is a loss, but we lost Bill and Frank.
Yes,
they didn't lose
you're
them.
right.
So that is, and the Bill and Frank storyline was happening parallel on such a long timeline to the show, both like in the now, but also in the past. Mm-hmm. So that is something that is really hard to quantify, where it's like, did Joel lose Bill and Frank? Yes. Insofar as that they knew each other and were friendly-ish, right? Like Joel and Bill saw each other in themselves, right? Mm-hmm. We lost Bill and Frank, though. The loss that Joel and Ellie have experienced so far has been 3 major ones. I do not want to diminish that, but Ellie never met Frank or Bill, right? Ellie is, I mean, beyond, and her sense of Bill is like, okay, like the note, which was, sums up his character beautifully. And then like, yeah. And then the, like the nudie mag that he had in the back of his truck, right? Like, he's like, oh, I got an idea who Bill was based on just this very limited information. So it's great when a show can do that. And I couldn't offhandedly name you an example of a loss that we, the viewer, have experienced that the characters hadn't. That is pretty rare, I would wager.
Sure, yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out. Like,
you're right.
The major loss has been Tess for Joel, right? This is a more recent loss based on a much shorter timeline, but still hits hard because
for sure.
I think there is a kinship and a bond that builds between these characters through the tension and the lived experience that they went through. But that this hits harder for Ellie, I think, for reasons we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought it was important to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because while the pacing is excellent, when you're in it and watching it on an episode to specific basis, if you look at the whole thing as a whole, it is very fast.
Yeah.
So I just think hopefully like the preview for next week's or Sunday's episode, tomorrow's episode, is very like there's snow on the ground. It's Christmas time. So we can assume at least 3 to 4 months have passed by the point that from where we started.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. That's all I wanted to say.
Of course.
But now we are in Kathleen's childhood home. So there's a military vehicle driving down the street again, and then we see Kathleen framed between 2 windows with peeling wallpaper behind her and her hands placed at the small of her back. We see a broken skateboard, a custom-made heart switch light switch plate. I confuse those words, but we see some bunk beds and more from a lifetime ago. And Perry enters here, but only to tell her that no one has been found yet. And Kathleen's mom, who is still alive apparently, was the one to tell Perry where Kathleen had gone. And she asks Perry if he has ever returned to his childhood home since Outbreak Day. But Perry says no, it's just, a couple 100 miles away from here. It's just too far. And Kathleen begins to talk about her brother Michael and how he would comfort her during bad thunderstorms. And he would use this concept of a big wooden box that nothing could get inside of. Nothing beyond that boundary could hurt them so long as they were together, they would be safe. And Perry listens to this quietly as she talks of her quote-unquote beautiful brother. But then she kind of stops, pauses, and says she's not that. She's not this beautiful person, and she never was. And that her brother would be horrified by what she has done since he's been killed by Fedra. And she doesn't want Perry to talk about forgiveness or talk her out of hurting Henry. Because even Michael told her this, the last time she saw him alive in jail, that she should forgive Henry. But Kathleen is too far gone. She's consumed by this, and her anger eclipses everything. And Perry talks of Michael's greatness, so he affirms, like, yes, your brother was this great man, but he didn't change a fucking thing. Kathleen is the one that changed everything, that overthrew Fedra. She's the one that made these changes. And that him and the rest of her men and her women, her people, are with her no matter what.
Yeah.
So Kathleen talking of her brother and what he might think of or have an opinion on the things that she's done since losing him is another very clear parallel to the games, with more themes emerging. And that's all we can talk about. I can't even talk about more in the spoiler section because it would just be too much.
Yeah.
But it is, we're not missing what you're doing here, HBO. Okay?
Just the ties that bind us at a high level, right?
Sure.
It's what are you willing to, what lengths are you willing to go to for the people that you love or your family, something like that. It is, we have a brother-sister situation here and a brother-brother situation. And, you know, Henry did a bad thing for a good reason, right? And it seems like Kathleen is doing a bad thing for a bad reason, right?
Sure.
And we see later in the episode where that gets everybody, right? And then you're left to decide was like, does the reason matter given the result of what we see here, right? Which is, again, this is a show that does a lot of it operates a lot in a gray area. And so that's all I'll say for that.
Yeah, I know it's tough to not just go, but so the tunnel vision. So before we are back in the dark, Kathleen's anger is resonating, but I'm beginning to, and this kind of, again, is a runoff a little bit of what we were just talking about. I'm beginning to feel a little fatigued at the constant hammering of, guess what's coming? Because, and I will talk more about this as this episode progresses. But by this point already in the episode, I was like, we get it. Like, we know if you are familiar with the story. And that's the thing. When I say we, I mean fans of the game.
Of course.
If you are a new Last of Us fan, then you are loving this for everything that it is. But if you are not new and have played both games in the DLC and you've been in this world, they're overdoing it a little bit for me now. And it continues throughout this episode. As great as this episode was, that was the one thing where I was like, you need to stop making things so blatantly obvious with the themes, because then they're going to be so redundant and repetitive when we get to season 2. And it's tough for me, but I'll leave it at that for now. And then we'll continue, because that's not the last time I'm going to talk about it on the episode.
Yeah. I think it's just a lot of laying groundwork, right?
But it's too much.
Well, I'll say this, is that we get some listeners reach out directly to us, and please do. We give our socials at the end, and we give email addresses at the end because we want that. We encourage the discussion. And at least a handful of people have reached out and said, like, these are things that I didn't think about until you talked about them, right? So if they plant the seeds of 5 themes throughout this episode, right? I think the success rate is 60% or maybe 40%, right? Like, maybe a viewer who is very casually just experiencing this for the first time is going to pick up on 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5, right? And to them, it's not hammered home. To us, who are watching it critically and comparing it with the notes that we have in our head for the other thing called The Last of Us, you're like, oh, okay, right? But I don't know if that's everyone's experience of it. So I just wanted to be, I prefer it this way than the other way, where they pull a theme out of their ass later and try to tie it up with what they have already shown us. I would much rather have them lay out the groundwork and then pay it off in some way that's meaningful. So,
and I agree. And that's what I said at the beginning of this episode. I think if you do a lot of these perspectives or thematic moments that will quote unquote pay off in later episodes or later seasons, that's fine. There's a way to do that, but to do so many, it's just becoming too much, because then it's, in my opinion, it's like this whole season exists just to tell the story of what's coming in season 2 and 3. And that's not all right. You're going to miss part of the beauty that is just the self-sustaining story that The Last of Us Part 1 was before they even knew a Part 2 was coming. So I feel like there's some retconning being done and a whole lot of thematic work because people were upset and divided. And there was, a whole lot of stuff that, again, we can't really go into, but
yeah.
And they're trying to lessen the blow, essentially.
Yeah. Speaking at a very high level, I know what you are referring to as a
It's not one thing.
It's not one thing, but there is one thing, right? And I almost take these stories. How to phrase this? You, on a standard television show, you might have a bottle episode, right? That talks about, if you had an ensemble cast, for instance, you might talk about one episode that focuses on 2 characters, just those 2, completely divorced from the rest, right? And it stands alone and it's great. And what HBO has done is, like, it has given us a bottle episode with Bill and Frank, right?
Sure.
And then, but that bottle was inside of a bigger bottle of The Last of Us, right? And the same is, I feel like the same is true of this one. Like, there is a bottle episode here of Kathleen and Perry. And then within that, it is ensconced in a larger bottle of The Last of Us.
Sure.
And to be able to tell a story in a story and have one filter up and one filter down back into each other, I think is really, really great. And if it goes up even one more level, like if they pull the camera back further and we're like, actually, it's in all of these are in a very large bottle, I would love that deeply. I do. Does Craig have a plan that included the narrative of a game that came out like 8 years after the original one? Very likely. This show is the easiest renew for season 2 I have ever seen in my life. Like, episode 1, I was like, it's getting picked up. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. There's like, this is getting picked up for as many seasons as they are willing to produce of this show.
Yeah.
So structurally, it makes sense to factor in things that might change. Like, very likely, I believe, will change. But to set up rules in characters and situations and consequences that are consistent throughout, if that makes sense. So I'm on the side of the fence where it's like, if they want to do all of these things in service of a later story, as long as it is not, it seems like it might be affecting your position of the story as it exists. It is not affecting my enjoyment of what this story is trying to tell, at least so far. Did I read that correctly? Is that a fair assessment?
It's a yes and a no, because I'm still loving every moment of this show.
Right.
But it will grow, like, I will grow weary from this. If everything about season 1 is only meant to happen to justify perhaps the shortcomings of what happened in The Last of Us Part 2.
All right, so we're going to go to the parking garage now, or the, I guess, underground into a parking garage. Regardless, our quad, our what is that? A quadret? Not quintet. What is the word for that?
Quadruple?
Yeah, but like a quintet, our band, our four-piece band. Listeners, what is the word for when you have four people? It's a duo, a treat, a quartet. Thank God. All right, a quartet. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Clip that. No.
Yeah, I will.
No. Our quartet. What is the word for four people? Is on the other side of the tunnels, and we've made it to the residential area, right? So we're walking up a main street, right? It's just an empty middle of America main street, right?
Sure.
Sam asks why they can't use their flashlights. It's dark, and that's scary for kids. Henry says it'll draw attention, but Sam counters with, "There's no one here?" ? Henry talks of his plan working, so he's feeling pretty good about himself right now, much to Joel's chagrin. One more house to go, then a river to cross, and that's it. Ellie asks where Sam and Henry are going, while sharing that her and Joel are headed to Wyoming, right? Offering up more information than Joel is comfortable with.
Sure.
He gets a little, as we on our notes here, he gets a little Joelish. And Ellie gets a little Ellie-ish, because it is essentially they're like, it's a huge state, right? Which fair.
It is.
Fair. Henry picks up on that and tries to call it what it is, which is fine. Ellie does an amazing impersonation of Joel here and how she wears him down, which was just great to listen to. But all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, a shot is fired and all of them hit the deck, right? They just drop.
Yeah.
And it's a sniper. They hunker down by an old car, and Joel kind of gets a peek around to see where the shot is coming from, which is a very old rickety house at the end of the street up high on the second or third floor, right? Mm-hmm. Henry panics here as he and Sam try to book it. They're like, no way. And they run away from the car they're hiding behind. But Joel shout and shot right ahead of them, gets them to turn back, right? And they just come back and they're like, okay, all right, well, What do we do? Henry is panicking a little bit, but here's where Joel's experience, supposed experience with this comes in handy. He tells Ellie to stay here. She tries to protest, but Joel says this plan will work. You know, he's like, we're going to go around, but he's going to go into the house and take care of the sniper. He's like, you just got to, essentially the crux of this is like, you just got to trust me on this one. Like, I'm not leaving. I know how to handle this. Mm-hmm. It's dark outside. And the sniper is a kind of a shit shot. I think even Joel says he's got shit aim or whatever. But Ellie is still, afraid of what if Joel dies, right? It's evident on her face. So essentially Joel gets up and kind of uses one of the houses and other cars as a flank to get into the bushes, the shrubbery, whatever, into the cover of night, right? And he makes his way to the house and he sees the bridge in the distance behind it. He's like, we're right there. We're so close.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, all right. And I think in his eyes there was a thing like, all right, Henry, he was telling it like it is. He was right. Right. Yeah. Joel gets in the house. He climbs the stairs. He makes his way up as the sniper continues to fire it. Right. Joel comes up behind him and it's an old man. Joel orders him to put the rifle down and slide it to him and then stay put for an hour before going anywhere. Right. This is really all this guy. It was very evident. Like Joel's like, it's real easy. If you want to survive, this is all you have to do. He gave this guy every opportunity.
Yeah.
But Joel knows what's coming here. The guy does not put the rifle down. In fact, he looks at it. And I think Joel says don't, right? And it's this is suicide for this guy. Yeah. Joel has the drop on him. A gun is trained on him, and he still goes for it, right? And he dies, right? Joel picks up the rifle which is kind of a signature thing from the games. But then we hear Kathleen radios to Anthony, the sniper, and that they're almost there. Hold them there. We're almost there.
Yeah.
Joel screams for Ellie, Sam, and Henry to run as former Fedra vehicles growl up the street towards them. Yeah. It's a great shot from Joel's perspective, where this like little sniper's nest. But we'll pause here for a moment.
Yeah, and I just wanted to break this scene up because so much happens, and I thought that this was a good stopping point. But so Joel grumbling because Ellie sharing details or oversharing details is very much classic Joel Miller as well. Because to him, details are meant to be shared with trusted companions, and while Joel has warmed up a bit to Henry and Sam, he doesn't fully trust them yet. And I don't know if Joel ever fully trusts anyone, really, since Outbreak Day, but certainly not that fast. And this continues to show his character's history and their present day, as well as Ellie's, all in one. Yeah. So it's just this brilliant writing, and the understanding of these characters continues to just shine bright like a diamond. Another Rihanna reference today. So, and we've said this earlier, but Ellie absolutely has Joel's number already because he protests, he grumbles, he protests some more, and then eventually he gives in. He is a protector, and he leads in the sense that his expertise and his know-how and this natural skill set of being a caretaker has to come first when he is with other people. And he will inevitably follow plans of those that are in quote-unquote charge of him, so long as he is able to properly see them through it all. Yeah. So while I would never go so far as to say that Joel is a follower, he's absolutely fine listening to someone rationally, looking at the plan, seeing if it will work from his expertise and his skill set. And then if it will work, he's happy to go along with it. If it won't work, then he's the one that takes over. I think that that's actually a really good mark of a leader, to be perfectly honest. But he never fully assumes that role because of his care. The way he cares and loves people is just ultimately, you know, at the end of the day, what he is about. And that's all I can say.
Sure.
Safely. Safely. Okay. The sniper section. This is an intense burst of energy for our main characters, as well as the supporting players. But it's the tip of the iceberg in this particular scene. But despite that, it was well placed. And though it was slightly different from how the game executes it, it needed to be what it was in the show. So ultimately, and this isn't a spoiler because this was in the game. Okay. In the game, the video aspect of it is you're Joel. You have to get from one end of the street to the other end to the sniper. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. You have to fight other bad guys as you go, use the houses and the supplies found therein to your advantage, and go from there. You can't really do that in a TV show and make it meaningful. Right. So what they adopted, I think, was a great adaptation of that. So yeah,
that's good.
And last talking point before moving on. So we often talk about Ellie's sharp sense of intuition on Wayfair and Wes, which you know, we've talked a little bit actually earlier in this episode about Ellie, but this show continues to lend more to Joel's ability for this as well. And while his knowing shines through violent encounters more than it does his interactions like one-on-one with people, or even just a social exchange in general, it's interesting to see this balance being built here with him in particular. Because Ellie's more of a loud intuition with people and will call you on your shit. Whereas Joel will see what's happening and read the situation correctly and then continue to do what he was going to do anyway, because that is his expertise and his experience coming in to do what he needs to do and what's necessary. So it's really interesting to me, which again, this is all present in the game as well, but I was afraid that some of those nuances wouldn't pay off in the show, or would be done so differently that I didn't really recognize that in the characters. But I think it's just being very well done.
Yeah, I agree. And I have really nothing to add. It's a balancing act, but it's the combination of what's written on the page and then probably what has been communicated to the actors themselves, I think, that they are infusing into the characters.
Perfect. I could have just said that and got my point across. I agree.
I mean, hey, it's good good to talk through it. And as you're talking through it, I'm like, what's the soundbite? You know, that's all. That's all.
I get that. But we're going to continue this street fight here. So the big bad run truck plows through the parked cars, lining the center of the street, punching them out of the way as it goes, much like a knife cuts through butter.
Yeah, that was a very cool visual, right? Yeah, you would be terrified if that truck was chasing you.
Oh my God. But like as a viewer, not being Ellie, Henry, or Sam, I was like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like it's just cool. It's a visually cool thing, but no, that would scare the shit out of me in real life. Like full stop. Perry and Kathleen are behind this truck radioing during this sequence, but things go from bad to worse really fast for Ellie, Sam, and Henry, and Joel begins firing at the truck as the trio race to get out of its way. Joel is beginning to sweat now, and there's this fine line of panic that he is fighting while still trying to maintain his composure and save these three people. But of course, something goes wrong, and the rifle jams. Ellie fires a quick few rounds at the plow, and of course, unfortunately, this is needlessly. As Joel fights the jammed weapon until eventually gives, and at the, thank God, perfect moment, because Ellie falls to the ground and her pistol is empty. So Joel snipes the woman who was driving the truck from afar, and it takes a hard, sharp left and careens into a house. Perry and Kathleen and the other vehicles following are not too far behind, though. And as everyone comes to a stop, the rebels exit their vehicles and quickly walk towards Ellie and Henry and Sam, of course. But a fire beneath the truck sparks and spreads fast. The gas, of course, was leaking. And bad to worse, like I said. And it consumes the whole vehicle until it explodes. And Ellie falls from the concussive force of this blast, but it's enough to distract all of the rebels and give Joel time to spot Ellie and Henry, saving Ellie and pulling her back to him and Sam behind a truck. And Ellie is okay. They're safe for the time being. But Kathleen and her crew begin to advance. Perry orders men to go up to the back of the house and take Joel out because they know he's up there, of course. And Kathleen addresses Henry now, telling him that he should just step out and get this over with. Parallels. Henry says that he will come out if she lets the children go, but in a very creepy, empty way. No, I'm not going to do that. It was, oh God, Melanie Linsky's delivery as Kathleen was disturbing.
Yeah.
She won't do that because Ellie is with the man that killed some of her men. And well, Sam is with Henry. And she knows why Henry did what he did, but she supposes that maybe the kid, who Sam in this instance, was supposed to die, and had Henry ever even considered that the world doesn't revolve around one child, ellipsis. That this is what happens when you fuck with fate. And I could really keep fucking going here. But Henry tells Ellie to take Sam and run with him. And Ellie and Sam link their hands. Henry takes a deep breath, and then he stands with his own hands in the air, showing that he is unarmed. And Kathleen looks on, but there is a visible pain in her eyes, which it's a little contrastive to what she's been saying, like her tone of voice, the way she's been approaching. But I don't think it's for Henry. I think it's for her brother, of course. And she throws her arms out and up before she says it ends the way that it ends. And just as she pulls her gun to kill Henry, and then presumably Sam and Ellie not soon after, the truck that caught on fire collapses and once again distracts everyone. Joel uses his scope here to view the destruction up close. And then, oh man, we start hearing some sounds of the infected begin to echo from the depths below. And the ground sinks in and the hole begins to expand. And all weapons are now trained onto this pit as the inevitable happens. And the infected explode upwards and outwards and race out of this hole. And all of these infected, we know, were trapped down there by Fedra for years and years, just below the surface, waiting for this wonderful, glorious moment. And Henry, Ellie, and Sam hide behind the truck or car, whatever, but the infected begin to surround them and they are forced to run in different directions. And Ellie is thus separated from them. Joel snipes any and all infected in close range of Ellie as she tries to get closer to the house where he is. And Ellie sees an opening in a car and begins to army crawl her way towards it. Joel takes out all of the infected in her path. And it's at this moment that Perry hollers for the trucks to run down all of the infected. Like, just, floor it, my guys. Let's go. Ellie climbs into the truck eventually and hides. Just like kind of sits there like, okay, this is what it is. And Joel continues clearing the surrounding area around that specific truck because that is his mission. Ellie is his mission. And Perry backs Kathleen away from the attacking mass of fun guys. But a grumbling,
No.
a very low grumbling begins from the pit, and it is not good. Slow motion horror captured on Perry's face, and then up from hell a bloater emerges. Perry stares for a moment before firing at it, and the bloater slams literally almost body slams a few rebels into the ground nearby, but Perry redirects its attention onto him for some reason. And Perry and Kathleen share a moment here because he is saving her life and allowing her to get away despite knowing what will come of this. And Kathleen runs, does not look back. Perry runs out of ammo as he fires off at the bloater, and the bloater reaches him and thus rips his head off.
God damn.
Yeah. Next, we see a child clicker quietly creep into the truck where Ellie is hiding out, and Joel fires at this child clicker after hesitating momentarily and misses. It was the briefest moment of hesitation, but he still hesitated. And then he goes on to miss several times in his effort to kill this clicker kid as it gets nearer to Ellie. And Joel is seemingly panicking as he watches from the window above this all unfold, and he can't do anything now because his view is completely obstructed. But Ellie works her way out of the truck and shuts the door in the clicker's face, and there's slight relief, but it is, of course, short-lived. Sam and Henry are in trouble, and Ellie sees this. But again, Joel only has bullets for Ellie at this point, so he continues to clear a path. And Ellie has a near miss with a truck that fucking flies down the street, of course, on Perry's orders. And Ellie goes to the brothers and knifes two clickers in their necks, which is classic video game kill for clickers. These same two clickers that were attacking the Burrell brothers. And eventually they are all free and begin to haul ass towards Joel and the house, or the end of the residential neighborhood. And once Joel sees the brothers are free and moving with Ellie, he leaves the window finally to go down and meet up with them. But just at that last moment, Kathleen stops and holds a gun out ahead of her, pointing at Henry, and Henry, who is now shielding Sam. Ellie spots an infected creeping up behind Kathleen, but of course they do not alert her because fuck Kathleen. And the infected, and it looks sometimes like the same child as the one in the truck with Ellie, but
I think it was.
The clothes look slightly different, which, by the way, that clicker child was wearing a Blue's Clues shirt. So she was infected when she was in her pajamas, which is just so heartbreaking. But anyway.
Jams.
Yeah. But the infected leaps out and topples Kathleen to the ground and begins beating her to death before ripping her throat out and thus killing her. Joel is finally out of the house eventually, and then yells at them all, who are still stuck staring at Kathleen being killed, to move and run. And this whole scene ends with a wide view of the street and how overrun it is with infected, and that big old bloater in the middle of the street, just, I guess, hunting down the next victim. But all of them, all of the infected, are now running in the opposite direction of where Joel, Ellie, and Sam and Henry are headed. But before we go, we have a bunch of shit to talk about. So
No.
this is intense to like the nth degree. The chase, the jammed rifle, the crash, the fear. They built around a few different parts of the game here, but all of it came together wonderfully. And
All practical.
yes.
I mean, for the most part, it was a actual set. Those actual people that were emerging from that hole, not CG. I mean,
Yeah.
no shade on CG, but
No.
I think they explained in some of that. There's like there are things that the human body will do. When it hits into things, when it rolls over things, that
Sure.
is very difficult for an animator to replicate. Not that they can't, just that it takes so much extra time.
Sure.
So that's why they went with the real people, and it was like, yup, the money is on the screen, as they say.
Yeah. And the bloater. I mean, the
And the
bloater
bloater,
was
the real guy.
a 6'6" dude who had an 80-pound suit on him. And
Yeah.
now the bloater they merged practical with a little bit of CGI.
Right, of course, you have to.
Yeah, you have to in that instance. But knowing that there was a dude in that, I just got bad chills.
Hey, sometimes you get the bad chills,
You do. But it was so well done. That a little behind the scenes tidbit for y'all. As a family, Andrew, me, and our daughter, Bella, who is almost 14, she'll be 14 next month, watch this every week together. And Bella was so impressed by the bloater scene that when the show ended, she was like, can we just rewatch that a few times, please? That was so fucking cool. And I was like, yeah. I mean, the sounds were exact to the game.
Yeah.
Exact. And but yes. So and this is where I'm going to talk about more of these hammered down themes
Unbelievable.
that I told you we're going to be talking about through the rest of this particular episode. The one child, the theme that one child shouldn't be above anyone else. And that maybe, just maybe, the world and all of these final occupants of it shouldn't hinge on the life of one person just because another person believes they should. But Kathleen is also a hypocrite here as well.
Yeah.
Every single person, and game fans who are listening to the show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone else, you do not know, and you don't need to know. So don't Google and spoil yourself. But we get it. Like, that's all. We get it. And I feel like this moment, this conversation between Kathleen and Henry, that should have been the final straw, I think. But then the end of the episode, she's still so consumed with anger, and this is where it leads. I think we got the point, like, from episode 4, really, that her fury and her need for vengeance outweighs everything else. And the hypocrisy of even me talking about this, knowing my stance on events that happen in the game, is laughable. But when it comes to Kathleen and just being like, have you ever stopped to consider that maybe Sam should have died? But then it's like, have you ever stopped to consider that maybe Michael should have fucking turned himself in to help a child? Like, you can just ping pong back and forth and go on and on and on down this. Again, there's no good people, there's no bad people, there are just people. There are bad people. I'm sorry, fuck that. There are bad people. But I just feel like it was overdone for me by this point. Like, I was slightly annoyed at some of the moments earlier that mentioned, but by this point I was like, oh my God, stop. Stop.
So I didn't hate this.
I didn't hate it.
No, I said that not insinuating that you hated it either, but just this didn't bother me as much as it clearly bothered you. I think that there is the two parallel themes that emerge here is when she mentions specifically in the earlier scene that her brother said to just forgive, right? Don't do it. And the consequences of what a one-track mind pointed in a negative direction can do to a
Yeah.
person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the collateral damage of that as well, because it wasn't just Kathleen that died here. It was literally, I mean,
Presumably
that,
everyone.
yeah, and potentially even now the walls of Kansas City are still up, right?
Sure.
So, but you could assume that every one of those people, the protectors of Kansas City, have died,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, remember, the walls were up, but the gate was open when we're first introduced to it.
True. That's true. And again, I don't know where that is in relation to where they escaped or whatever, but like, you know, we can just assume that like a large contingent of the people of Kansas City, the revolutionaries, are now gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that just leaves the regular people who may potentially relied on them for a number of things.
Sure.
Vulnerable as well. So maybe Kansas City just doesn't exist anymore after this because of one person with a vendetta, right?
Which is what I said in episode 4. That's what I said to you.
Right. Yeah. And the other one though is choosing to the wrong things for the right reasons, the wrong things for the wrong reasons is the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes from a place of, are you doing it for there is the realist view, which I think is what Kathleen is like. Maybe he was meant to die, right? And that's a very like cold, callous, and realist take on the situation, right? But then there is the other side of that is like the hope that Henry had. He was like, look, it's like, if I have the smallest chance to save my brother, I'm going to take it. I'm going to do every single thing I can.
Mm-hmm.
So it just shows, I feel like it just shows two sides of the same coin, like,
okay,
and how that cascades down. Like we see Joel in Henry, right? We see Henry in Kathleen a little bit, and vice and all the way back down. Oh, it's like all the way up and down the line. There are shades of the other characters presented to us.
Absolutely.
And I really like that. Like you just imagine like one decision at any point in their entire life. It's a real butterfly effect thing here, where it's like Joel could have been Kathleen, right?
Absolutely.
Kathleen could have been Joel, but you see the strengths of these people, that they're leaders, they are decisive, they have a lot of the same characteristics, but how the things that happen to you in your life push you down a path is different.
Of course.
That's I think that's beautiful. I mean, it's not often we get to see that like writ large like this, I think. So yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I completely agree. I think it is a beautiful way to tell multiple stories at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
But I just know that it is all being done with more, with a, I don't want to say a sole purpose, because I'm not the writer of this show or the showrunner, but it's all being done for a payoff that it's like, what are we doing now if everything we're living for hasn't, like, we're living for decisions and moments that haven't even happened yet and might be different. So like,
that's what I'm
maybe they're doing all of these themes now because it will be different in season 2 and 3. I don't know. All I know is feeling constantly hit over the head with, make sure you remember this lesson, make sure you feel empathy for everyone, make sure you don't forget. It's like, I get it. I got it the first time we went here in episode 4, and now we did it 6 more times in episode 5.
Welcome to life as a fan of The Walking Dead. You know what I'm saying?
Too much. I never watched that show.
So I'll say, I can't tell you how to consume your media, although it just seems like you're looking so far down the road and letting that color your opinion of what's happening right now based on a future storyline.
Because I think that's what they're doing. And that bothers me.
Yeah, but we don't know.
We don't know, but I just know, being in this fan base for years now and seeing what happened and the blowback and the vitriol that occurred, I think that they are trying to avoid that because it's an enormous show studio versus a game. It's a lot more money involved and a lot more people, a much bigger audience. And that, I mean, all I'm saying is a TV show can get canceled for making the wrong decisions.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if an HBO show can get canceled for making the wrong decision. I don't know. I mean, I certainly know HBO shows have been canceled, but I don't think it's for anything other than nobody watches them.
But that's
So.
no, but that's how people. And oh God, I don't want to be a contrarian, and this is such a long episode, and we still have so much to go. But I just the playing field is not the same, and I just think that they're putting a lot of bomb on what is being done in season 1 to avoid the explosive divisiveness that happened with one particular game in the series, and that's all I'll say. Like, because they don't want people basically it's like, I'm going to protest by my wallet, whatever that expression is. So like, I'm going to cancel my HBO membership because I do not like what is happening. And thus the show loses viewerships, the show gets canceled. You can't do that with a video game. It's much different. There's a lot more at stake here in the show world than the video game world. So yeah, a bunch of people are bitching and complaining and crying and being bigot assholes, but like, the game still was a success. You can't take it back. You can't return it. You can't undo any of that. But the show, well, the show can fucking get canceled if people dislike a lot of it.
All right.
That's different.
I
And that's what I'm afraid of. And I think having Pedro Pascal in a very significant role, things might change.
All right.
That's all.
All right, listeners, I'll just say that,
Sorry,
we
my
don't
eyeball.
we don't spoil. So,
Yeah.
things that Jackie is referring to are much later
Oh yeah,
down the line.
like season 3 probably.
Don't seek it out if you are interested in continuing this story kind of in real time. But it sounds like I potentially, this is just me assuming the best is, and Craig being who he is just delivering a cohesive season of television that is contained, right? I think you go into a project like The Last of Us a little bit more confident that you're going to get picked up, but never like 100% confident, because
You're
again,
right.
during the time that this was being made, HBO changed hands from company to company, right?
Oh yeah.
And everything was on the chopping block. So maybe under the old guard, Craig and Neil and the rest of the team was like, oh yeah, we got a home run on our hands here. But that's not guaranteed with these new people. They've pulled entire movies because they were like, oh, it makes more sense for us to write this off as a tax thing than it does for anything else. So point taken, and listener, just with the understanding that
My vagueness might be frustrating, and I apologize.
and frustrating, and also potentially informing how you feel about the delivery of themes that emerge at a later time, or don't emerge, or the lack of, or the absence of. It's a lot. It's a lot to put it. It's a lot to digest.
It is a lot, but I don't want to not listen. I know that Wayfair and Strangers is more of a home to the wide angle opinions, essentially, or in-depth opinions, and that's fine. And I have certainly curtailed myself on the last cast to a huge degree.
Okay.
But this episode got on my nerves a little bit with that. And that's really all I wanted to talk about. It doesn't detract from how much I fucking love this show. And episode 5 is my second favorite episode and it is very close. Like
It's close.
very close. But it could have been it just didn't need to be that way. That's all.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So Joel versus the clicker kid and Ellie in the van. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
The brief moment of hesitation, I think, is because several reasons. One, of course, Sarah. You know, the reminder that he did have a little girl and she is not here anymore. Two, you probably don't see infected children that often.
It's true.
And even though we've now seen 2, so the kid in episode 1, the boy that Joel eventually threw into the pyre, and now this little girl.
This was the full-on infected kid, though. That kid was still like...
Yeah.
In the first episode was kind of still a kid. This was not a kid.
No, this was a baby clicker. That's legitimate. And by the way, the actor's name is Sky. Oh, hold on. I forget. I know it begins with a G. Sky Cowton. And she is a contortionist.
That makes a total sense.
And I've seen like the prep pictures and things, and amazing. Like just perfectly cast, creepy as hell. You did a great job, Sky. And so he has this moment of hesitation, which if that whole scenario played out differently and Ellie was killed by this clicker, I don't think Joel would have made it through this night. Because that brief hesitation caused him to miss that first shot because the kid got her head in the car by that point. And you need to get a shot off in the clicker's head to make it one and done. So, and it's not even one and done with a clicker shot to the head, unless it's a direct shotgun blast, and then it just, but
as we've seen, they are durable creatures.
Yes, they are. And so that happens, and the clicker advances, end over end, seat over seat. And Joel, Pedro's acting in that moment where his cheek is shaking. That's some Kurt Russell ass shit, Andy.
Hey. What is this promotion here?
Yeah.
Cross promotion?
Yes.
What?
Everyone go watch Andrew's other podcast. It's called The Kurt Locker, where he reviews Kurt Russell movies. It's wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. But and I love Kurt Russell, but that's one of his things when he's in an intense moment or dire circumstances. One of his cheeks literally like shakes.
Yeah.
And that happened with Joel in this episode because he could not kill this clicker. And then there's that moment of it's inside. I can't do anything. I am blinded by this. I have to fucking wait. And he doesn't fire off any more shots. He doesn't fucking care about Henry and Sam at this moment. It is all about what's happening in this van with Ellie and the clicker. And of course it's quick. Ellie makes her way out, locks the clicker inside. And then there's this brief, like his eyebrow goes up just enough to like denote relief. And it was so perfect. Pedro, if you win an Emmy, it might be for that moment, that whole sequence. Okay. So I just wanted to talk about that, but I just can't imagine what was going through his mind. That's all. We talked a lot about foreshadowing and the foreboding events and things like that. So I'm going to skip that note. So Perry versus the bloater.
Perry v. Bloater, Dawn of Justice.
This was so awesome and frustrating at the same time, this entire encounter. So while I never expected Perry to be around for any significant length of time, excuse me, hold on. So while I never expected Perry to be around much longer than he was, especially once learning that he was part of Kathleen's crew, I feel like the lead up was a little womp-wompish. Like, why did he redirect the bloater to him?
He's protecting his men. Why does the captain go down with the ship?
I guess.
He's the guy in charge. He was the head honcho.
Why wouldn't he run away?
Wow.
Not to Kathleen's direction, but like you fire off 20 rounds, it quote unquote sees you. It's just going to run in the direction that you keep firing at it.
Yeah.
So
Come
I
to
would
me,
just,
you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I would fucking keep running. Like, I don't know. And then
maybe he looked at it, he sized it up. He's like, I could take it. I get in a fist fight with this thing.
Fuck that, Perry, you lost. But yeah, Womp Womp feels like too lame of an assessment. Really, it was so intense. But I do love how that his death is exactly how a bloater kills in the game.
Yeah.
It was carried through in the show, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in the game, it gets its fingers into your mouth, basically like this, and then rips upward, and then it fades to black, and your character is dead. In the show, got the fingers in the hands in his mouth, ripped upwards, ripped his head right off his fucking body.
Yeah.
So brutal. But I'm sad. Like, I like Perry.
But you like Jeffrey Pierce.
I love Jeffrey Pierce. Yes,
that's what it is. It's worth noting a couple things about the clickers and bloaters as opposed to the others is that a bloater, clearly, as we've seen, the bloater's goal is not to make more infected. It is to just straight up kill threats. Right?
Oh, for sure.
The bloater is like a guardian of the infected, you know, it's like you could think of him as like a knight of the infected or whatever, just there to stop anything, right? Mm-hmm. Ripping Perry's head off will not create a new Perry. Yeah. It's like you've now that is done. Yeah. That is over.
Yeah.
So just a kind of a cool, different that there is a visual and motivational hierarchy to these infected. They all have different goals, even though they work together. Mm-hmm. They all have different goals.
Well, yeah. So the runner's goal is to infect. It will just bite you and then move on. The stalkers is similarly because they're still able to see you and hear normally, like we would be in a room together. And then you get to clickers and bloaters who just murder. Yeah,
they're not there for.
That's it.
If you happen to die from a clicker, but you're not terribly affected, you may turn, but it's not.
Sam was bit by a clicker.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Their goal is more. I feel like more murdery than not. Like
full stop. Yeah, it rips your throat out.
Yeah.
In the games, like if you're caught by a clicker and you don't take care of that shit, throat gone. Yeah. Oh, it's a brutal animation too. But anyway, so. Last talking part before we move on. Infected, we talked about this. Yeah, just the infected child and Joel's reaction to it getting closer to Ellie. I like that they included that, but it was disturbing. That's something that there we go, I'll pivot a little bit from the original topic. That's something we've discussed on Wayfarer and Stranger. So in the games, for non-game folk, there are no infected children ever depicted.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Yeah.
It gets a little dicey to have the player character
kill a child.
Yeah, even if it is a zombie. That's why we don't have it often in zombie media at large. They did that 3 times on the 15-season run of The Walking Dead, or however many seasons it was. There were like 3 kids that were zombies.
Yeah.
It is not a thing that you and they don't ever like they're like, oh, that's a kid zombie, we're gonna have to kill that. Cut camera to someone's reaction to it. It's a smarter way to do it.
Sure. And just a little side note, so there was an actual standing rule, like an actual rule on the set of The Last of Us for the entire season it was filmed, that they are never ever to be called zombies. They are infected.
Sure.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the science behind certain things when we get to the end of this episode. But I just wanted to put that out there. But Andrew, we're in the motel.
Let's go to the motel. Sadness, sad all around sadness. Oh my God. Sad. We are in the motel. Joel and Henry are listening to Ellie and Sam talk. They have like kind of adjoining rooms, right? But they're all in the same room right now.
Yeah.
Henry asks if the kids will be okay. Joel is coming down from an adrenaline rush at the moment. But he says ultimately it's easier if you're a kid because no one else is relying on you, which is pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Joel acknowledges in his own way that he and Henry are doing a good job, like protecting these kids, though. Like, you know what? I think we got this figured out.
Mm-hmm.
But he redirects to the comic book Endure and Survive, as Savage Starlight says. Henry and Joel joke that slogan is redundant. It's like, it's not great, you know?
Yeah.
So pretty funny. Endure, survive. Joel offers Henry and Sam to come along to Wyoming, despite the journey being pretty treacherous, is what we are led to understand. Henry accepts the offer before Joel even finishes. And there appear to be he's very emotional about this. There are tears welling up in his eyes. He believes it'll be a good thing for Sam to have a friend. I think that's why he's getting emotional. He was like, I think this is going to be a great thing for Sam, right? Fresh start. So we get to the next morning. A fresh start. We'll get a fresh start in the morning, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So from here, Henry tells Sam he should get some sleep, and he listens. So they get up and they go into this adjoining room. Henry closes the door, and Ellie goes to the bed, but they were poring over this comic that they had, and as they go into the room and they close the door, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to bed. Psych. And they open up the comic and they continue to read a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Sam is paying attention but pauses their reading by asking Ellie if she's ever scared. Ellie responds in writing. She asks, well, do I look scared? And Sam writes never on the little board. Ellie says she's scared all the time, and Sam nods. And then Ellie continues the thought, and she writes, of scorpions. But Sam, that's not really what Sam's looking for. We could tell kind of in his expression and his demeanor. He's not looking for that.
Yeah.
She rewrites the answer to his question, and it's the fear of all fears, really. And she's like, I'm scared of ending up alone. She already is alone in a way in that she is immune, right? She could, theoretically, everyone around her could succumb to this thing, and she would, if she's smart, could continue and survive. Mm-hmm. There is a moment of silence here when at this moment when she says she's scared of being alone. She continues by asking Sam the same question. Sam asks if the monsters infected are just monsters, or if you're still you on the inside. Sam reveals his bite mark, and Ellie curses and then quickly looks to the door, right? She's like, oh shit, right? Mm-hmm. Weighing the decision to tell Henry and Joel versus not, or what her heart is telling her to do. We see a lot of things run through just her face in this scene.
Yeah. She
shows Sam her bite and then rushes to write that her blood is medicine, right? Which then leads us to, now we know she is kind of misunderstanding her condition, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually really, really sad, to be perfectly honest. The next thing, she pulls her switchblade. Sam shakes his head no. She cuts her palm, and she places it on Sam's bite mark. So she smears the blood of her hand all over the bite mark. And, you get it's the same thing. It's like, oh, if you get stung by a jellyfish, you pee on it. That's not real. Don't do that. But, that's the gist of what is happening right here. Sam takes the magnetic pad again and asks her to stay awake with him, right? Ellie promises she will, and she learns the American Sign Language for the word promise, which is beautiful. It's transcendent, great. Ellie hugs Sam, and they hold on to one another here. And Ellie looks hopeful even at this moment. But let's pause, let's pause here, take a beat, and really unpack our sadness.
Yes, always unpacking sadness on The Last of Us.
That's our tagline. The Last Cast, unpacking sadness.
Yeah, that's a t-shirt coming. So the hard part, according to Joel, is having someone to rely on you in a world like this. So after Sarah died on Outbreak night, was Tommy reliant on Joel? And then was Tess reliant on Joel? And now it's Ellie. Or is Ellie truly the one that he feels the most responsible for since Sarah's death?
Mm-hmm. I think that's 100% true.
Okay.
I think that everything everything we're led to believe up to that point. So like the way that he had talked about Tommy and Tommy's capabilities, and just the brief glimpse that we saw of what Tommy's capable of in the first
Sure.
episode. That's just a very we got each other's back situation. It's not like Tommy's like, what do I do? None of that.
Yeah.
Like it's like he's beyond being a joiner, very much a capable individual. Same with Tess. Tess, from what we saw, she could hold her own, right? Misfortune struck, but beyond that, clearly her and Joel had a very long relationship together,
Yeah.
based on mutual capability, right?
Yeah.
Ellie is the first person after Sarah that, presumably, I'd go so far as to just make it definitive on it and say, like, first person that is 100% relied on Joel for a lot.
I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Could not say it better. So Sam's question and his infection of whether or not an infected person is still themselves on the inside, or if the fungus has usurped autonomy and mental awareness. So this is something that I think has been really misunderstood. And I think even to a degree, we have misunderstood or misinterpreted the science. But a lot of fungal experts and mycologists have, because of The Last of Us on HBO now, they've been talking about this. And basically, science tells us that the cordyceps fungus, or similar, bypasses the brain. And so it is still the person in there. They just have no control over their actions. Which is...
It's dark.
It's extremely dark, because Sam is asking this question and Ellie has this full hope, this belief that her blood is medicine and it can make a difference. And even probably up to the moment where she wakes up, she says, hey, and we'll get to that. And then we see that it doesn't work. So to know that every infected, and even going back to, I think the first episode, right? Or was it the second? It was the second episode when they were beyond the Boston QZ. When Tess was kind of talking to Ellie a little bit about the structure and the connectivity of this, just the mycelium and everything else. And the whole infected population, how they're aware of one another. And it's like, that's like, it's almost like the big boss is the mycelium network. And everything else is just the pawns on the board. Like,
Sure.
And that's a really harrowing way of whittling down the significance of human life because of an infection. It's like hauntingly sad to think that not only do you become this hideous monster, but you are still aware of the fact that you are a hideous monster. I think there's some questions, though, regarding like how does the fungus sustain the human body, because the human body needs food and energy and has to use the bathroom and like all of the human processes that we have. How are those maintained by this infection? So those are questions that I have, like, if the mental awareness is still there, but the rest of the body dies, I don't know. Or is just, I mean, those are the things that I'd be interested in for anyone listening that might have the answers. So please let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah. A couple character isms that I've picked up recently, especially with Ellie. So Ellie tends to bite her nails or hold her hand with like her thumb and index finger close to her lips during moments of high stress or deep thought in very low action moments. So Game Ellie used to hold the last two fingers on her left hand. So her ring finger and her pinky finger on her left hand. And this was something that Ashley Johnson does every once in a while. And I think, like, and I've watched interviews with Bella Ramsey, and I think that these are real things that the actors do that they brought to these characters, but it resonates so well. It resonated in the game and it resonates now because we all have these little things that we do. And I've been noticing it more and more with Ellie in these very quiet moments, but stressful moments. And I'm curious to see how this continues or plays out throughout the series.
Could be. I mean, you have the director of the game on set,
Mhm.
and you have a great fan of the game at the helm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it could just be little nods or Easter eggs kind of
Mhm.
situations. Where like, oh, when Ellie is, stressed, and you don't know that could have been some direction day of filming the game, right?
Mhm.
Because it is all motion captured. Uh, that's stuck, right? You're like, that is that's a thing that Ellie does, right?
Yeah.
So we'll repeat it.
Mhm.
And it could just be that, I believe Bella has played the game. Bella Ramsey has
She
played
has
the
not.
game. Oh,
She's watched some gameplay.
okay.
Yeah.
But picked up on a bit of what Ashley Johnson, the original Ellie, was doing there. So,
Mhm.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah.
Sure. And just side note, Ashley Johnson does this amazing. It's not amazing. It's amazing to me because I like it and I feel like it's unique. But when Ellie in the game cries, I can't do it because I have glasses. But she takes her thumb and her middle finger and wipes slowly underneath her eyes to brush. She doesn't brush the tears away like this. She like goes like this. And Ashley Johnson in real life, that's what she does. And I always
Interesting.
found that really, I do. I find the characters that are infused with the realness of their actors, oh my God, it makes their whole entire presence on screen that much more real.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see that stuff, all in all.
You'd love to see it.
TLDR, happy to see it. You'll love to see it. The conversation between Ellie and Sam and how they share a moment before it all goes to hell. I think that this was a really important bottle scene. Like we've been talking about bottles on bottles on bottles. And
Right.
I think
How
for
many
Ellie's,
bottles are we?
yeah, oh, it's many, many now. I think that this bottle moment was so important to Ellie's characterization and even the end of this episode with how she shuts down a bit
Mm-hmm.
because of this very, like it started out just talking about a comic book, enjoying time together, and then a flip switches and it's like, fuck. No, I can do something about this. I have this deep belief that I can change this. I can do something. And then, yeah, it doesn't pay off. So, very important that they included this moment, that they had this bonding moment between Sam and Ellie, and even a teaching moment from Sam to Ellie, in a very literal sense with ASL, and then in a very figurative sense after he's dead.
Yeah.
So, very emotional.
Hits you right in the feels.
Yeah, it really does. And with, Ellie trying to cure Sam with her blood, going back to the beginning of the episode, I feel like this was a very beautiful, I might get choked up, beautiful moment of Sam having a superhero in real life.
Yeah.
Because that's what he idolizes. That's what he believes in. And you're seeing this very, very deep belief on Ellie's side, and she's active. She's proactive about it. She's trying to save him. And that is that savior complex that all superheroes possess.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a bookend moment, such a full circle moment. And I'm so thankful that they did that. I really am, for so many different reasons, but giving Sam that moment of superheroes are real before he was just consumed by the infection was perfect.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was up until then, you saw he considered his big brother a superhero as well. The
sure.
two,
Yeah.
and so he met another one in real life, and she saved him from underneath the car. I mean,
Yeah.
she couldn't ultimately save him, but she did go out of her way to rescue them from two clickers.
Yeah.
She like, that is no small task,
Mm-hmm.
right? And earlier in that episode, Henry is incredibly impressed that, oh, you went up against clickers and you're here.
Yeah.
And that's why he enlists their help.
Yeah.
And again, in the same episode, two clickers takes them out.
Yeah.
Right. So it is, I don't think it's an understatement to say that Sam truly believed Ellie to be a superhero. Like, I cannot believe she was able to do this. She was bitten, but she's okay. like all of those moments compound cumulatively to be like, yeah, that's a reasonable assumption for an 8-year-old to be like, yes. And that's why it really stings like
Hurts.
a motherfucker.
Yes, hurts. Doesn't sting.
Yeah.
Can you can you take the last comment? I don't think I can
Sure.
get through that.
So Sam asking Ellie to stay awake with him, it was that was like the break. That was the break point. That paired with the hug, I think, at the end. He didn't ask for his big brother. He didn't even ask to be saved, really. Like
Yeah.
he might not have necessarily even believed that Ellie's blood medicine could have saved him. He just didn't want to lose himself. And he really trusted Ellie enough to ask her to stay awake with him, right? That's the thing. I think that's a very human fear, is to go to sleep and not wake up again, right?
Sure.
Especially now you're like, oh, dang, one of those situations. So to stay awake in the hopes that the infection wouldn't take him, that he wouldn't slip away, was very powerful, very very affecting.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah, it's that
Yes.
awake awareness, his fear of losing that, his fear of losing his life, like facing potentially the last night being alive. What could that mean for his brother? What could that mean? Just, I can't imagine. And so many people in this world have experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time we really get to connect with someone on that base human level of what's going to become of me.
Right. Also, think about this, because it's worth noting. I've said this. I feel like between the last cast and Wayfaring Strangers, I've said this a million times.
Yeah.
Nobody ever tells anyone when they're bit.
Yeah.
So when they do, in a moment like this, it's fucking huge.
It is
right?
huge.
He offered up this information. It wasn't that he just like turned overnight, and that would be very sad.
Yeah.
But
which is what happens in the game.
Right. And an adult, even being bit, I feel like he's holding on to some hope, right?
Yeah.
Which is important in this world, in this life that they are living.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas an adult would not. An adult, I'm bit, well, fuck it, I'm going to turn, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially what I believe the adult attitude was. That's what happened to Tess. We saw it. We saw what happens to people. Tess didn't necessarily say, fuck it. She wanted to be useful in her last moments.
Yeah.
Right? As useful as she could be before the inevitable happened. But she pretty much accepted her fate.
Yeah.
Sam offered up that he was bit in a situation where, just trusting Ellie, who could have very well just like bust into the other room and be like, he's bit, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was the trust there, the vulnerability there was massive. That it came from effectively an 8-year-old. I don't know how old he is in real life. Probably roughly that age, I would imagine. But he's incredibly, just. He has an old soul, as you say. Like he's punching way above his weight class.
Oh God, yeah. We're gonna see more from Kevon for sure.
Yeah. And so, all of that combined, I love that. Such tropes that are so ingrained in a story, a genre tale like this, when and how they are subverted is incredibly interesting to me. And this was one of the reason this scene works is because that it was subverted, who it was conveyed to, and what they tried to do.
Yeah.
All those three things working in tandem, really, that's why it hurts like hell to watch, because it's, any other permutation of those would have been less effective, I think.
I agree.
They figured out the right combination to make it work great.
I agree. I do agree. And let's Let's finish this episode. We are at the end of the line now. It is morning at the Ranchland Motel. Ellie wakes and looks to find Sam sitting on the corner of the bed facing the sunlight. And she calls out to him with a hey, but there is no response. And then she walks to him, taps him on the shoulder, and he turns and snarls before attacking her. Sam is not immune, and he was not cured. He is infected now. Sam's muted hiss/scream wakes Joel, who is sleeping with his good ear available this time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's then that the kids fall into the living room out from their bedroom. And Ellie is screaming as Sam attacks her. Joel reaches for his pistol, but Henry gets to it first and points it at Joel. And he fires around into the floor to show the severity of how much he needs Joel to stop right now and not attack his brother. And then he turns to Sam and Ellie, and he shoots and kills Sam. And we see Sam bleeding, dead, laying on his side. Partially, we don't really see.
Yeah.
Thankfully. And Joel asks Ellie if she's okay, but Henry stops him by pointing the pistol back at him. And in shock and disbelief, he sort of begins to assess this whole situation. And Ellie looks around as well during this moment, maybe looking for an out, maybe looking for a way to help Joel. Either way, there's just panic everywhere. And Joel asks Henry to give him the gun and to take it easy, but Henry just keeps asking, what did I do? What did I do? And he looks back and forth between his brother and Joel and then back to his brother, and then Henry kills himself. And Ellie reacts... Sorry. Ellie reacts with this keening noise. It's like a mule, essentially, and it is just this guttural, uncontrollable sound that comes out of her. And it's like soul-breaking for me, Andrew. And then she just sits and cries, because what else can you do at that point? And Joel silently whispers, "Oh God," and that concludes that scene. And shortly thereafter, we are outside, and Joel has just buried Sam and Henry beside one another. And Ellie walks over to him from the room with Henry's backpack in tow and Sam's magnetic board. And she kneels beside Sam's grave and places the toy onto the freshly unearthed dirt. And after this, she asks Joel which way is west. And Joel, who is still holding the shovel, signals to his left. So west is left, left is west. And he looks to the sign Ellie placed onto Sam's grave, which reads simply, "I'm sorry." Joel's expression changes here to a more sober sadness that is now taking over him. But Ellie calls to him from, maybe a couple dozen yards away with "let's go" before walking on. And Joel puts on the backpack, which is now his. He tucks in his coat and grabs the rifle and walks to Ellie. And Ellie watches him approach in silence, a stony expression back on her face. And the episode concludes with Joel and Ellie once again alone and walking west.
Yep.
So, quick note, this backpack design is the exact backpack that Joel Miller uses in The Last of Us Part 2. So I just wanted to note that real quick. Before, because I don't really consider that a spoiler. It's just a design choice.
It's cool. Production.
It is cool. It is, yeah. So fun little thing. Fun and serious, I guess. But I love that the adults let the children have the big, full, queen-size beds, whatever, in this situation.
You're on the couch, kid. That's how that would go.
Yeah. But it's a subtle choice, but it's important because it shows the importance that these adults place on protecting the kids, no matter what, even at the expense of their own discomfort for a night of sleep. They both could have taken, like, Sam and Henry could have just been like, they're brothers, they're sleeping in bed, and Joel could have been like, get on the fucking couch, Ellie, or whatever. Like, it was just one of those choices that it's like, yeah, that's what an adult would do in this situation. And I like that.
Yeah.
Unless you're on vacation and everything is peachy and wonderful, then the kid gets the couch.
Right. Get off my bed.
Yeah. So the TV shit that we mentioned with the backpack saga back in episode 4, basically all of it was done to get Henry's pack onto Joel's back.
Sure.
I do wonder if there will be some sort of significance to maybe an item inside of the backpack that we will discover in a future episode. I'm a little curious about that, but could just be the design choice overall.
I love what they're doing here. And I don't know if it'll continue, how much further it'll continue or to what degree, because, we just, there are a lot of things we don't know, but like that this is a way for us to remember these characters in small ways. Like Ellie's gun is Frank's, Joel's backpack was Henry's. So like there are a couple other kind of very distinct things.
Sure.
Whether they're pieces of clothing or other stuff, we'll just leave it at that, that could be these kind of inherited trinkets from meaningful people. And that's, I think that's just like, I like that choice a lot. I think that's, rather than it just like being the backpack that we found at an old Walmart or something, it is imbued with meaning because of a shared experience. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a beautiful way to see that and to carry that forward, to see what else is going to just build upon that. Yeah, it makes it interesting. Sam and Henry's death. So, I mean, it was just brutal. Like, it was just absolutely brutal. And it was so tragically depicted in this episode. I wrote that it's a close second to the episode with Bill and Frank, but this was tragic. This was tragic and heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, whereas Frank and Bill, it was beautifully sad, which is very different.
It was a choice rather than I mean, this was not a choice.
This was not a choice.
This was not, no. And not in the same way that Bill and Frank was a choice.
Exactly. And I mean, just trigger warning for talking about suicide for a moment. Ultimately, Bill commits suicide with Frank.
Sure.
And Henry commits suicide because he killed his brother. And it's that other parallel of, I can't survive without this person. But with Bill and Frank, it was, I don't want to survive without this person because I had a beautiful life with this person.
Right.
With Henry and Sam, it's, I cannot survive without this person. So It's not really a choice. It's, this is it for me. That what I just had to do was the last thing that I ever have to do beyond what I'm about to do to myself. And it's just, it's powerful. The power of choice in this world weighs so much heavier than anything 90% of us are familiar with.
Yeah.
And it really shows you how different life could be in a matter of seconds. I mean, Henry went to bed with, we're starting a new life tomorrow. And he wakes up and it's over.
That's the end of the story.
Yeah. Oh, okay. One more comment. Again, just, and I don't want to talk too much about this, but the two, out of 5 episodes, the two main issues that I have with it is the hitting us over the head constantly with themes that are all meant to build to season 2 and 3 and the adaptation of a game. And the second one being Ellie's non-processing of emotions, which is also linked to a future game as well. I don't want to dive too deeply into either one of them. One, because we already did with the themes and perspectives and things like that. And I don't want to be repetitive any more than I have been. Sorry, not sorry. And 2, when I first, I'll admit this, when I first watched this episode, I didn't like how cold Ellie was at the end. But now having rewatched it, and more importantly, having sat down with you and talked about it, I completely understand that choice of, I can't even talk about this. I'm shutting down because, there's somebody before Joel and Tess, and then there's Tess. And now there's Henry, and more importantly, there's Sam. And now it's like, now we're back on the fucking road and we're alone again. And this keeps happening in such quick, fast succession. Nobody is able to process at that speed one death or one tragedy, let alone several.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more softer this many days out from it. So that's one benefit of us taking the week to get here.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. You have more time to process, and you process Ellie's non-processing.
Yes.
Got it.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Not to make it about me, but yeah.
Meh.
Charlie, The Last of Us. Sorry. Oh, Pedro Pascal on Saturday Night Live. If you have not seen it, please go watch it. Last section, the TV versus game spoilers. Let's just punch our way through this real quick.
Punch.
So Henry in the game tells Sam, you stick to me like glue, like glue. So his stay with me felt reminiscent of that. And I really liked it because that was one of my favorite lines of dialogue between Henry and Sam. I like the delivery. It's warm. It has this like, just familial bond thing happening there. It was great. Kathleen and Perry remind me of two characters from The Last of Us Part 2. Very, very stark, or not stark, very, very similar dynamic. And I don't want to name them. I was going to name them, but I'm not going to. Okay. Because of the pitfalls that we see in this episode and the choices that were made on account of vengeance and revenge, the same dynamic exists between other characters that have similar arcs as well.
Okay.
The events seen through different perspective tactic. The Last of Us loves to do this, like absolutely goes whole ass ham in part 2 with this. But again, I think it needs a better balance overall.
Sure.
Otherwise, it could become redundant, miss its mark on the intended audience and beyond. So I'm eager to see what they do, but I do have my, I'm a little like, let's see.
Shields up.
Yeah, shields up.
You're
Thank
like
you.
You're like Batman. You're like shields.
Shields. Yeah. So Sam, Henry, Joel, and Ellie going underground. Not quite a sewer system like it was in the game, but still brought more of the harrowing parts of that section for sure.
Yeah, we don't have to operate the sewers and like drain shit, which no human would be able to do. But still cool.
Yeah, still very cool. Great choices for location, and again, it brought in a bunch of different elements and worked them to be pertinent in this world. Danny and Ish artwork and its significance to a side story in the game. So very long story short, because The Last of Us loves to tell side stories via notes scattered around the world.
A lot of reading.
They can be one note. They can be 4 or 5 notes. And Ish, this character of Ish, takes place pretty much start to finish in the section of the game with Henry, Sam, and basically the Pittsburgh, the whole thing with Pittsburgh.
The Pittsburgh analog, Pittsburgh, Kansas City analog, right? That is when we learn of this character that we never meet. Called Ish.
And basically Ish was the one that started the underground settlement in the sewers. Mm-hmm. So all of the artwork and the kids' tables and the living conditions, all of that was started because Ish went underground. He lived out on a boat through the first few months of the outbreak, and then when he ran out of supplies, he went and burrowed underground and created this whole settlement before it unfortunately fell apart. And that was the character of Ish. But that artwork is an exact identical copy to artwork in the sewer section of the game. So I've heard, I think Neil Druckmann tweeted that it was his favorite incorporation from the game was that particular artwork. So I loved it.
Makes sense.
Kathleen's brother being horrified by what she does now, if he knew. So,
just be vague again, I think.
Yes, very vague about very important main characters and supporting characters in events that will be in seasons 2 and 3. But this is something that again, will come back thematically. And the street and sniper section. So I was very much hoping that this would be included, but here's the funny thing. In the game, I always forget about the sniper section. Always. And in the show, I fucking forgot about it. And then when it happened, I was like, fuck yes! Like, which is exactly what happens to me every time playing the game. And I played the game hundreds and hundreds of hours, dozens of times. And every time I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. I don't know why I forget about that part.
There you go.
We already talked about Perry's death and how bloaters kill in the game. But my sister, who has never played the game but absolutely loves the TV show and loves The Last Cast. So, hey, sis, thank you for listening. She was curious about how bloaters die in the game. Versus, because we still have a bloater alive now, just roaming the streets of Kansas City.
Should we potentially spoil this? I mean, you kind of spoiled it for your sister, but
I did spoil it for her sister.
Would this be a moment later in the show about how to address one of these things?
It better be.
Or maybe they're unkillable. I don't know. It's just, but it is in the game. It's very there are a couple ways, but very specific ways work better than others.
I'm just going to use one word. Okay. And then you can tell me to bleep it.
Boop.
Fire.
Fire.
That's it. We're just going to leave it with fire.
All right. It is interesting that in the show it emerged from fire, essentially.
Yes. And to
Pretty
fire
cool.
it shall go.
All right.
And Sam and Henry's death. So in the game, the differences with Sam and Henry's death. So Sam does not share with Ellie that she is infected. They do have the conversation about what she's most afraid of, and it is the same answer of ending up alone. And then Sam kind of has a little bit of a tone throughout the whole scene, and then Ellie leaves to go out into the living room with Henry and Joel so she can just throw her backpack on the ground and go to sleep.
Doesn't he also ask if you're still you?
He does.
So that is also very, are the monsters still you? Like that is that's also from the game, which is really
a powerful
kind of, it's something it's scary to think about also, but yeah.
Yeah. It is very scary. And I'm very glad that they brought both elements into that. So Ellie's, what are you most afraid of? And Sam's, am I still going to be me, essentially? And, but want to hurt my family or want to, because that's the other thing, too, that we don't consider of the infected. It's like the ones who don't tell anyone and then just end up becoming these horrific monsters. It's like their first thought has to be like, fuck, am I going to hurt my loved ones?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to hurt my family? I don't know, who fucking cares about myself? Like, my shit's, I'm done for. Stick a fork in me, bitch. Like,
I'm toast.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just, and then the other thing that they tweaked a little bit with Henry in particular in the game, he points the gun at Joel, but in his moment of absolute desperation, he's just kind of like, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. But he's looking at Joel. But we can assume that he's blaming himself in that. And in this show, it was, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? So
arguably a better choice of dialogue.
I agree. And that is the end of this long ass show. This is the first 3+ hour show. If you've made it this far with us, guys, thank you so much for being here.
If you haven't, we totally understand.
Yeah, fully fucking understand. It's all good. Show rating, I'm going to give this one a 9. A 9.5 out of 10.
I once again, I abstain from this arbitrary rating system. I don't think I rated. You just started rating things.
No, I've been rating since episode 1 because I remember all of my ratings. I just haven't written them down. I have a weird number memory thing. Episode 1 was 10 out of 10. Episode 2 was 7 out of 10. Episode 3 was 10 out of 10. Episode 4 was 8 out of 10. And now episode 5 is 9 out of 10.
All I'm doing is I just really quickly, while you were running off your numbers, which are pretty accurate, I just went back to episode 1 notes that we have. There is no section for score or episode review.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, don't add them now. I'll see. And I'll get the email notification that the document has changed. That's all.
Hush. People don't believe him.
You'll
wrong.
hear from me if I think an episode is bad, but otherwise just assume that I believe it is a masterpiece. How about that?
Fair enough. I love it. I absolutely love it. So our contact info, and then Andrew will take over the rest of the show. So if you'd like to follow along with us, if you would like to reach out and get in touch with us, whatever you got going on in your mind, share with us. Over on Instagram, TLOU Podcasts. Twitter at TLOU Podcast. YouTube, just look us up at TLOU Podcast. We also have Wayfaring Strangers, which is our coverage of the games. We have coffee. If you would like to throw a couple bucks our way to let us get our own blend of coffee of the week, depending on what we're in the mood for, we would greatly appreciate that. And you can go to ko-fi.com/TLOU podcast. Just heads up, that is primarily for Wayfaring Strangers, so all of the bonus content over there is all game related. But again, if you're into it, we would appreciate it. So thank you very much. We also have a website, and that is tloupodcast.com. More updates to coming to that shortly. If you'd like to follow me everywhere, Jaded Vader. If you'd like to follow Andrew everywhere, Dark Driving. So yeah, all of the internets at the same time.
Every single corner of the internet.
Yeah.
Not safe. Not
safe.
Listener. Again, if you've made it this far, my God, you must be on the longest run of your life, the longest drive of your life, potentially the longest cooking of dinner of your life. I don't understand. I don't get. Maybe you've broken us up into. We're at the runtime of like a Martin Scorsese movie at this point, right? Unbelievable. We have saved you 0 time on watching this episode. In fact.
We've cost you 3 episodes.
It's sunk costs at this point. However, I guess if you're here, you're enjoying it. So thanks. You don't have to. We don't want anything from you. We're not. That's not us. However, if you want to help the show and get more people involved, one easy way to do that is to be like James G. Or be like, get your ass to Mars, in that you give us a 5-star review on your platform of choice. And if that platform allows you to write a review, just taking a few moments of your day to click something in there, maybe like 100 words, just be like, this was very funny. They talk for a long time. They had one good point this episode. Whatever.
We talked for a very long time and only had one good point.
Sometimes that happens. I'm sorry to say. Sometimes people talk for their entire life and they have one good point.
Yeah.
If you have the time, that really helps us. Obviously, you get the shout out at the beginning of the episode. We'll read your review. We will, sing your praises, sing your song, as it were.
Yes.
And it's just great. It really brightens our day to know that we are not screaming into the abyss for hours. Literal hours. So please, if you have the opportunity, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, wherever, 5 stars, and then on iTunes, a review. Obviously, you can email us directly, reach out via socials. We're here. We have people, I can verify through other people that we talk back. So
Yes.
We're not just here, here in this podcast world. We're fans.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Rate and review. It's great.
Yes. I just took I used my phone to take a picture of how long our record time is just to send it to everyone and be like, I'm sorry.
Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah. That's what we do here. So if that's your bag, we're in this together. Let's just we're sitting down at a bar or at a dinner, just enjoying company and talking about something we love very much. That's what we do. Andrew, please take us out.
Until we bury the delusions of a cure for an incurable plague next time, runners, we leave you beside the soil of all those broken promises at sundown. That's a reference to the game.
Sure is. But which game?
Game.
Just game.
It's a reference to game. Oh my God.
That's it.
The clock says 3 hours, 24 minutes, and 24 27 seconds, 28, 20, 30 seconds.
We did it. Oh my God, we did it. We done did it. And now, here's the thing. And I like real quick.
Let's
These
get it
are
up to
only
3:30.
9. These are only 9. It's 9 episodes. We have a lot to talk about in a very short amount of time, essentially. So we're capitalizing on that. And if you love it, then
I'm just going to keep a running list of here's all it is: the runtime of the episodes as HBO airs them, and the runtime of our episodes. And at the end, I will do a calculation, and I will say, wow.
I know.
How did we deliver 4 times as much content as HBO did? God only knows.
Yeah. We'll see. We might change up the formula a little bit come season 2, but as of right now, we have 3 episodes. Wait, 6, 7, 8. No, we have 4 episodes. I was like, wait, what are we at? We have 4 episodes left, so we're just going to keep it status quo. But really, thank you guys for being here, and we'll be back literally in a couple days on Wednesday.
Enjoy.
Yes.
This is us on, for video viewers, you get a nice little dance that we do. And
go Birds.
There you go. I think pitchers and catchers report actually.
I know. I'm excited about that too.
We're done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. Bye.